I'm Eric from Longbox Review.
I'm Peter from the Daily Rios, and this is episode 37 of Eric and Peter's Legion Project Podcast. And welcome back to the Legion Project Podcast. I am your host, Peter.
And I am the other host, Eric.
And we are here to continue we have a lot of things going on here, right? We just celebrated our 5th anniversary. Happy anniversary, Woo-hoo. Eric.
Woohoo!
5 years of a podcast.
Traditionally it's the anniversary in which we exchange gifts made out of wood.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And so I looked this up, Peter, when I put the tweet out about our 5th anniversary in real time just a few days ago as we record this, and I found somebody on Etsy, I think. I don't remember, one of those platforms. Anyway, they had made wood cufflinks with the Legion logo. I don't know, burned into it or cut into it. I'm not sure, but anyway.
That's amazing. I would wear those. Did you get them? No?
No. Cufflinks, no.
How dare you? So yes, it is our 5th anniversary. So that means we've done 49 episodes. So what's that average? Almost 10 a year, right? Almost, just underneath.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's better than I thought.
It's not a bad record. This is the 37th episode of the Legion Project, but we've done 12 of the tales. So that makes this episode 49. So the other thing we're celebrating with our very next episode will be episode 50 as we cover, not to jump ahead, Legion of Superheroes number 38, which is a fairly monumental issue in this run.
Yeah. Well, and I think just generally for Legion fans, right? Because that,
right.
That's how much are we assuming our listeners know about this story, Peter?
Yeah, the hardcore fans of Legion know. If anybody's listening casually, you're going to find out why issue 38 is monumental. Sure,
that's a better way to. Yeah, I was about to just jump into spoilery territory, so let's go with what you said.
Okay, good. And that also means this is the start. This episode, we are going to cover 2 chapters of the big Superboy story that has been teased, that has been talked about here and there on our show. And now we finally get to do it. We are going to cover, originally we felt we were able to cover 3 chapters of this 4-part story, but looking at our notes, we're just going to do 2. We're going to do Legion of Superheroes 37, and then it continues into the second chapter in Superman number 8, John Byrne's Superman number 8. So we're only going to cover those 2 chapters, and then next episode we will cover Action Comics 591 and back to Legion of Superheroes 38. 5th anniversary, heading towards our 50th episode. And another fairly large story within Legion mythos, outside of Great Darkness Saga, outside of Eye for an Eye, outside of Censor Girl. Here's another one. Bam. Superboy.
And the Universal Project, too, I guess. To some degree. I mean,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
We just covered that. Yeah.
We just covered that. I know it seems so long ago.
On to the next thing. Before we get too far away from this regarding our 5th anniversary, I did get a response from Sean from the Bat Pod and the Never Ending Reading Pile, which is one of my very favorite comic book related podcasts. Anyway, Sean thanked us for the years of great content.
Awesome.
Regarding our 5th anniversary, like I said. And I just wanted to say to the listeners, thank you to everyone who listens, who shares, and of course, who sends us feedback like that, or any feedback for that matter.
Yeah. Okay. We are going to keep the preamble short, and we are going to jump right into the first chapter here. And if you are one of those people who, if you're reading along with us and you've never read this before, I'm sure you're going to get some backstory. We assume that you're reading along, and if you're not reading along, but you're just listening, you'll pick up the story as Eric gives a synopsis, as we give some general thoughts. We don't try to cover every line and every panel, but I'm sure we'll talk about a lot in this issue.
Yeah, although sometimes I can guess that people think we do.
Okay. All right, let's kick off. Let's jump in. Legion of Superheroes number 37.
Titled A Twist in Time. This is by Paul Levitz, writer, Greg LaRocque, and Mike DiCarlo, artists, John Costanza, letterer, Carl Gafford, colorist, Arnstar with an inking assist, and Karen Berger is the editor, with a cover by Steve Lytle. As they advertised in DC Comics at that time, they summarize this thusly: in the first of 4-part Superboy crossover story. Boy, I think I typoed that, Peter. The Legionnaires want to battle the Time Trapper, but wind up as guests of Superboy in Smallville, USA. As to the specific contents of the issue, Brainiac 5, Mon-El, Lightning Lass, Sunboy, Ultra Boy, and Colossal Boy, boy, it's a lot of boys, help repair the time beacon. And then Brainiac 5 has Block and Timberwolf bring a new, larger time bubble in. Cosmic Boy and Night Girl arrive, and Brainiac 5 is about to call the rest of the Legion to confront their foe when Polar Boy stops him, citing EarthGov's objection. At the prison planet Labyrinth, Saturn Girl, Sensor Girl, and Tellus bring the sleeping Universo to his cell, with Saturn Girl commenting how Universo is an almost pure evil force. Barely human, she says. Polar Boy allows a small team to accompany Brainiac 5 to the Time Trapper's Citadel at the end of time. Even Cosmic Boy agrees that a select team may be more effective than a small army. Meanwhile, the Time Trapper, aware of the Legionnaires' impending arrival, gloats that he will give them everything and then take it all away. Mon-El and the team encounter difficulties as they traverse the time stream, but a pathway clears and they arrive in Superboy's time? At Legion headquarters, Dream Girl dreams powerful and haunting images that make her feel like she had a fever, she says. In Smallville and in disguise, Mon-El, Ultra Boy, Cosmic Boy, and Night Girl have headed into town, and Night Girl is nearly run over by Chief Parker. Then Pete Ross encounters the Legionnaires, telling them that everything is just fine in Smallville ever since Superboy saved them from the weird red skies and energy wall. But the teen hero has been laying low ever since. The group go to the Kent General Store, where Ma gives Ultra Boy a big hug, and he introduces the Kents to Night Girl. At Science Police headquarters, officers Aaron and Cusimano give Lieutenant Devron some career advice when Morella Tau arrives asking for theirs. At Legion headquarters, Shrinking Violet insults Phantom Girl's boyfriend, and Wildfire surprises Dawnstar with his new look. Back in Smallville, it's dinner time at the Kents, where the Legionnaires talk about Superboy as their inspiration when Clark Kent arrives. They adjourn to the basement, where Clark assures them that he is the real Superboy, and while they are distracted by the Legion's statuettes, Clark zaps them with a stasis ray, freezing them in place. Clark starts to change into Superboy to go to the rest of the time-hopping Legionnaires who are outside of town when Lana arrives asking for help with her algebra. At the mission monitor board, Polar Boy and Element Lad discuss Polar Boy's decision to support EarthGov's concerns, and Element Lad tells his new leader that he agreed with the decision. At the edge of town, Brainiac 5 receives an emergency signal from Cosmic Boy's flight ring, and Pete Ross arrives telling them to run for it. They try, but Superboy arrives with the stasis ray. However, he is just a tad too late. Later, Superboy vows to keep Smallville and his family safe by trapping the rest of the Legion. He heads to the future, and at the end of time, the time trapper prepares for the next phase of his plan and declares he shall rule eternity. And it seemed like it took me an eternity to read all that, Peter.
There's a lot that goes on.
Yeah, this is one of those issues where there's like you said, a lot going on, but there's such short scenes that it doesn't feel like a long issue or like it's a packed issue, and yet there is a lot of plot going on in here.
Now, you've read this story before?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I read it at the time of publication because I knew this was coming, and I wanted to find out more about what's going on with the Legion at that time. Like I said, a lot of the issues that I've read up to this point, I've never read. And there's a lot of issues that after this story that I haven't read either.
Same.
But definitely for these two issues, I came back. I dipped my toe back into the Legion universe to find out what happens to Superboy.
Right. And just to give some context, we are in May of 1987. That is when these books shipped and hit the stands, which means we are a good almost, when did the crisis end? At the end of 85, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mm-hmm. So we're good, almost like a year, if a year and a half away, a year and some months away.
Yeah.
We're from the crisis. We are not quite a year into John Byrne's Superman. Because Man of Steel started in the summer of 1986, so we're almost a year into John Byrne's Superman. And this mystery about what is going to become of the inspiration of the Legion of Superheroes has been boiling for quite some time. You could probably say going back all the way to Legion of Superheroes number 23, during the Steve Lytle Mon-El issue.
Right.
Where they do venture back to Superboy's time. They encounter a time storm. Things are kind of like, what's going on? We've already covered Legionnaires 3, that miniseries with the Time Trapper. We've covered Cosmic Boy miniseries with the Time Trapper, where we really get the sense that the history that the Legion thought they knew, something's not right. Something's not right to the 20th century. Doesn't jive with their records.
Right.
And what was the other thing I wanted to touch on? So Legionnaires 3, Cosmic Boy miniseries, going back in time is Superboy. Oh, and Legends. There was little things here and there in Legends as well. But that's what this mystery. It wasn't a mystery like who is Sensor Girl. It was just this thing rumbling in the background. Time is wonky. Their history is wonky, and now we are going to possibly get some answers.
Mm-hmm. And I recall my own, questions, I guess, about this because, like you said, Man of Steel had come out. It's not been quite a year, and so there's been at that time there were several months of, well, if Superman was never Superboy, what does that mean for the Legion? I mean, that whenever anybody that I knew talked about, and this was obviously pre-internet, so it was just conversations I had with my friends who read comics too. But whenever anybody talked about, Superman and the Crisis and John Byrne's Superman, I mean, it always led directly to what about the Legion? Right. So it was almost, the Superman stuff was almost like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But what about the Legion? We got the stuff has to make sense, and so finally we get this answer, I'll just say.
Yeah, maybe not an answer in the first issue, because this first issue really felt like Levitz had to remember that new people were going to jump on the book.
Right.
If they were reading Superman but not reading the Legion, this book was promoted in the Superman books. So you had to read this issue if you wanted the first chapter. And in the one of the letter columns, there was even a mention that Yeah, in issue 42 of Legion of Superheroes, they talk about this issue, and someone complained about having to read outside of the Legion, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
fans do. And Paul Levitz was like, well, I'm sorry, but it did increase the title by 20%,
Yeah, I had that in my notes as well.
right? Which was very interesting. And it said it didn't affect the Superman books, at all, if any,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And this was supposedly a popular title, and yet it's still increased by 20%, whether he's
Mm-hmm.
fibbing or whatever, I don't know. But that's huge. Now, part of that is also because this was being sold in the direct market. The Superman books were still being sold on the newsstands.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot about that aspect.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that had something to do with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also get this through subscription. So there were other avenues. So my first pass at rereading this, I was thinking how I could see, we're so familiar with Levitz's writing now. I could see all the moments where it's like, yep, there he is laying this part out for new readers. Here's another part he's reading out for. Everybody is just saying just enough dialogue to talk about everything that I just mentioned: Time Trapper, Superboy, history, inspiration, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all kind of laid out. So my initial read of it was, I think I blamed my memory because I knew this issue so well that my first read of it was anticlimactic in a way. I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of an okay opening. I didn't learn anything necessarily new. Nothing, I have a lot of notes, but I was like, why am I not jiving with it? And I was like, oh, it's because I know this issue. I know this chapter very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to remember it was for new readers as well. So that's sort of like my first general feeling of the book. But I don't want anybody to think that it's going to stay that way, because upon a second and third read, everything I go, okay, I got it. I got what this issue is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I didn't have that reaction at all reading this. And usually I think I tend to react that way when I'm getting a lot of stuff I already know. It's like, okay, oh, come on, let's get through this and get to the good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was just I enjoyed the history lesson because of the way that Levitz and LaRocque told it to us. Somewhat indirectly, because it seems so, so to speak, natural in the way that the Legionnaires are interacting with the Kents, for example, and just talking among themselves. I just really enjoyed that. It was the like I said, the history lesson or that backstory to it. So I kind of dug that how that was given to me, and that caused me to go. Obviously, this is not a reaction I had when I first read it, many years ago, but coming back at it now, oh God, you said 87,
Mm-hmm.
35 years,
yep.
Something like that, right?
Yep.
Anyway, I come back to this now for our discussion, and it's like, well, from this little tidbit at that, okay, so that's referencing this thing, and then this is referencing that thing, and so I'm like, I'm taking these notes about, oh, well, this happened in this issue, and so I really enjoyed that aspect. It totally unintentional consequence of the product that was produced
Right.
by the creative team. So yeah,
Well,
I quite enjoyed it.
when we get to the second chapter, I'll touch back on what you mentioned about history even more. I'm sure we're going to talk about it in this issue, but in the second chapter, there's something that strengthens that notion for me. And it made me appreciate this issue more because of that. And when we get there,
I'm very curious now, because I had a reaction to that second chapter too, and I'm curious if we are on the same wavelength, or are we like opposing forces, so to speak.
Just a couple other general thoughts. Very heavy Mike DiCarlo inking
Oh
on this
boy.
chapter.
Yeah.
Not, it doesn't, I'm not necessarily being negative about it. I just noticed it, and that's, you never want that, but so I was a little disappointed in that because I felt those ink lines, man, they are just thick, 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 thick for a Baxter book. It's like so unnecessary, especially
Yeah.
like if you compare it to the line work of the cover with Steve Lighto, who was always much thinner in the way he inks his figures and things. There's just variation. It's just variation.
Yeah.
Um, so that was something that I just took a note of. I'm not going to talk about it much once we get to the main story, but and the interludes were surprisingly, which usually are things that I enjoy and I think you enjoy as well. Like every now and then we're like, yeah, we like the B and the C and the D plots that pop in. Some of them for the first time for me felt like I almost was like, go away. I don't care about you. I don't need that. I want more of the Superboy stuff. Not that I felt the Superboy stuff was cheated. I don't feel that at all. It just that was something that I felt was unnecessary for this chapter, especially for new readers. And that's unfair to say because some of them are continuing plots. The Science Police one is just like sure, I'm sure it's going to connect with something, but for this issue, no, we don't need that.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I like that one particular page for a couple different reasons, it's like, why would you introduce something like it? Because it's such a pivotal story, and you're throwing in this new thing.
Yeah,
you could wait a couple issues, I would think, especially based on what we are given. It's not like something that's integral to this particular storyline.
Right, because you want, when you read them, you sort of say to yourself, what are they continuing? Are we learning anything new? Are they wrapping up anything? Or are they setting the seeds for something down the line, which is totally fair.
Sure.
And some of those interludes don't do any of that, or they do it, but it's in a way that feels intrusive, I feel,
Do you think it's because I think a lot of these are like just one page, right? So the Science Police one, the Wildfire
Girl.
one, Dream Girl, even though that's a beautifully illustrated page. They're all just one page, and it's in and out real quick.
Right.
So what was the point of that?
To break up the story, I get it. I think there were other ways that they could have done. Levitz could have done it. So.
Let me ask you this: I'm trying to put on your memory cap here for when you first read this issue. Were you compelled? Was it something that was like, oh my God, I can't wait to read issue 38 or the next chapter, I should say, or was it just like, oh, that was an okay introduction, but let's get to the next issue?
I don't know the specifics. I do know reading the whole story, especially the John Byrne chapters, I was engrossed because I really liked Byrne's Superman run. And I was collecting all three, the Superman book, the action book, and the Adventures of Superman, which was Marv Wolfman and Jerry Ordway. I was collecting them all. And I mean, I was all in with DC after the Crisis anyway. And just that they were going to acknowledge this, and I know I didn't understand the larger consequences of Superboy and the Legion because I was a Legion reader, but I wasn't a Superboy and a Legion reader, right? I just knew the surface history. He's the inspiration. He shows up. Supergirl shows up every now and then. Okay. But there was just something, and it probably was the Crisis fault. There was just something of the notion of a Superboy and a Superman fighting each other. And it's not an imaginary story, and it's not Red Kryptonite splitting up Superman into his younger self. Like it's well, one of my notes is, we forgot to mention that we're going to try to do our best not to talk about chapters 3 because have you read 4 yet? You haven't read 4 yet, or have you read 4 yet?
Oh yeah, I've read it.
Okay. You mean recently you've read it?
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. I have not read 4 yet, but we've both read 3 because we thought we might talk about it in this issue. So we're going to try our best not to talk about that. However, um, I wrote in my notes, Superman has become the personification of the DC multiverse focus point, especially under like Morrison, Final Crisis, Multiversity. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
archetype of Superman,
Hmm.
and then the archetype of the Justice League and Batman. It's like everything branches from those three concepts when it comes to the multiverse, right? To see Superboy and Superman on the page together when DC has said that we're done with alternate Earths and we're done with, alternate characters, it just blew my mind,
Yeah.
I dug it. I really dug it.
Hmm. Hmm. And just from a personal reading experience, because I always got a certain thrill whenever that happened. And there was a DC Comics Presents issue, and I forget the number,
Hmm.
but that was one of my first DC Comics Presents, as I recall. And it has those two interacting with each other. So, but at that time, of course, it was literally Superman's younger self, and it wasn't this other thing that we now are getting into with this issue. And so, but yeah, seeing those two together and the oh gosh, I'm jumping ahead if I say that.
I know it's so hard.
Dang it. Yeah, I can't say that just yet. Okay,
Okay.
I'll stop now.
Yeah, we'll try our best not to, are you talking about like DC Comics Presents number 14,
Maybe.
where Superman is chained up with kryptonite
Yes.
chains and Superboy is firing yeah.
A kryptonite bazooka.
Yep. Hmm. Number 14 from 1979. I have that
Yeah,
issue. I have most of these issues though.
I love
Yeah.
the Bronze Age stuff.
Yeah. At first I thought you were talking about DC Comics Presents 87 from
Mm,
1985, which is Superboy from Earth Prime, which
right.
Superman does reference in, like, I think the second chapter of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, which also hit the stands,
The
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 year.
the the fake Superboy. Sorry. I do not have a lot of love for Superboy Prime.
Well, that was before he was.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. Those were our general thoughts. The cover. Do you love the cover?
I do. And there's a couple interesting things about it. Uh, we get Superboy bursting through a Welcome to Smallville, which usually says underneath that like home of Superboy or something like that. In most comics I've read over the years, that we don't have that because he's bursting through the middle. But with the sun in the background and him, the pose that Lido gave Superboy here, he's kind of smiling. He just, to me, he looks like the inspiration that he is to the Legion, and in this one little pose, right? But then you at the bottom of it, you get these weird reactions from the Legionnaires on their faces. This is not a, oh, we're so happy to see you type of reaction. This is a sense of surprise, maybe even a sense of uh, apprehension or even doom. So what's with the tension there on this cover? So I really dug this. Plus, just the colors of it. Like I said, with that setting sun in the background and all the colorful characters here, including Superboy. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. I wrote Superboy bursting through the Smallville sign as if a metaphor of the past
Mm.
in breaking into the future or invading into the future
Oh
or
my
something
God.
like that.
See, folks, this is why Peter is so good at what he does here. That's an amazing observation. That's great.
That's me just sort of pulling things. Because you're right. Why? I mean, until you mentioned it, of course, they're all looking at him perplexed. And uh, I guess I didn't take it as anything but they're reacting to him flying through, right? Like, but maybe it's because they are so confused about what exactly is their origin that they're, oh yeah, Superboy, but is it Superboy?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Right, right. To the to that point, there is that. Well, I guess we'll get to that, but there is that little bit of conversation where or in that scene where Superboy is basically saying, "Hey, I am the real guy,"
Right.
right? And I always I thought that scene was kind of weirdly paced, I guess, because they really jumped to that, and so maybe that's what I was thinking of as I was taking my notes or writing down some stuff for this cover, because I kind of tied these things together.
Yeah.
Their reaction on the cover, that conversation. In fact, I thought of this later, but to that idea of, is this real or is this fake? What's going on? The way that the light reflects off of Superboy's face, it kind of makes him look a little plastic-y,
Mm.
Evoking he's not real, he's fake.
Mm-hmm.
So I doubt that was their intention. It's just how I'm interpreting the way that he looks on the cover here. But in my mind, that works really well.
Yeah. And we've mentioned that before, and I'm sure it'll come up in the conversation, where the few times that they do go back to Superboy's time post-crisis, like the Mon-El issue we talked about, it felt different. Now maybe it felt different because we knew there was a story coming, or we knew it was out of place because they keep telling us there is no Superboy. So why is there a Superboy? So the whole aspect of his time and his character and the way he smiles, and you're just like, who is this dude? Who is he? Right? Like, it's not quite the level of who is Sensor Girl, but it's there in the back of your mind. Who is this character if we were told that there is no Superboy?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So we don't know exactly how we're going to talk about this. We don't necessarily want to go page by page, but what we'll do is we'll start with the first scene, the first 4 pages, and then we'll see how it takes off from there, because that's the thing that sets up not only the first chapter, the first issue, but also sets up for any new readers, where the Legionnaires, as you mentioned in the synopsis, are trying to fix the time beacon because it was attacked by the Time Trapper last issue. And Brainiac 5 is sensing a little bit of urgency because he doesn't know if there's going to be an attack, if the Time Trapper is going to come back. And this makes everyone pretty much on edge. They all have learned what has happened in the Cosmic Boy miniseries from last issue. And the key elements are there, I thought, at the bottom of page 2. We finished Brainiac 5 says, we finished before the Time Trapper resumes his attack. We expected him to follow his destruction by an all-out war on our century. And then Sunboy says, well, that's based on Cosmic Boy's guesswork. We have no proof that the Trapper's behind the damage. Okay, so introducing that this is all from Cosmic Boy, there might be some confusion. And then we get a little bit more. If history, this is Mon-El, has been altered, who else could be responsible? It's beyond any mortal power. And I thought, there it is. You got your villain. You have possibly a motive. You have where the information is coming from, and you have what it's all affecting. I mean, I thought just in that one panel alone, I was like, wow, Levitt, you really laid it out there.
Yeah. And not in a way that makes it, didactic or shoved in your face.
Yeah.
It maybe skirts that just a little bit, but not in a real offensive manner. So yeah, and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 word balloons and an editorial footnote so that we know that which issues we're actually talking about here.
Right. And I thought it was good too, because it's conversational. You have a large team. They always, this is the conversation they have, whether they agree with each other, whether they don't, they challenge each other, either because of personalities or whatever, and I thought it's a good example of some better versions that we've seen in previous issues. But for one panel, I was like, okay, that's good. I like that.
I have to just as a point of contrariness, I guess. Sunboy's comment, right? That given the evidence, the time being is destroyed, Cosmic Boy's own report of what he saw, what he experienced, and Sunboy is still going to be the contrarian.
You're right. You almost want to go, you didn't read Cosmic Boy? You didn't read
Right.
Legionnaires 3? And you didn't read those reports?
You don't believe your teammates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And that would be fine if we saw, I guess we saw a little bit of that played out a little more.
Yeah.
It's possible that it could play out future issues, but
I was going to say, Sunboy's questionable. He's very questionable. I mean, he does things that are not always in the best interest of people who was supposed to be his friends. I mean, his whole attack on Gigi, how many, a year ago, whatever that was.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, he's yeah. If you're going to give it to a character, him, Wildfire,
mm-hmm.
The ones that are like know-it-alls. You're either a know-it-all or you're, like they are, or you're quote unquote dumb, like Block and Timberwolf and some other ones. So.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the sequence I thought wraps up. If we go to page 4 real quick, the this is another example of a good example of what it means to be on a team like this, because Brainy is taking charge, creating a new time bubble. He's got his team working for him, and he's like, great, let's call the Legion. And then Polar Boy's like, well, you can't do that. And I was like, Polar Boy, you're right. He stops, he freezes his Legion flight ring before he can call everybody, and he says, I just talked to EarthGov, and they are not happy with the entire Legion leaving, especially after the Universo project. So
yeah, that's true.
Totally agreed with him on that.
What I put in my notes for this is because I kind of, based on letters that I've to the editor that I've read, and knowing how Polar Boy's term plays out a little bit, not any specifics, but I kind of have a general sense of it because I did, I have read later issues in this run.
Okay.
I tend to think that Polar Boy's term as leader is not well regarded by the readership. And of course, even in story, with some Legionnaires. And so I wondered, is this kind of the beginning of that? Because, he comes in and he kind of comes across as the paper pusher, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Follows the rules, or
yeah, but government red tape, that kind of, he's a pawn of EarthGov, so to speak, right? And but to what you said, what just happened to the planet Earth, if I were the leadership on Earth, I'd be going, well, wait a minute, whoa, you don't know exactly what's going on, but you're going to take the most powerful force on this planet and remove them from our or from Earth and expose us to possible other issues. Yeah, that's I totally get that from their perspective. That's not a good plan.
Yeah, and when you continue on, like on page 6, where Brainy's like, the two of them are kind of jousting a little bit, right? Polar Boy's like, what if the Trapper strikes here? What if the Dominators decide to capitalize on the damage Universo did to Earth? There he goes. He's bringing it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Brainy's like, and then he says, oh, or what if we don't come back and the Time Trapper does, right? Is that what you're really thinking? And he says, I can frame a hypothesis for any situation, but none of it would get us any further. So It was almost in a way like Brainy brushing him off, but yet also he's the smart one in the room. He could sit there and joust, or he's got to accept it, because who's brainy to make this call?
Hmm.
Other than being the smartest Legionnaire. Okay, I get that. But he's not deputy leader, and he's not leader.
Right.
So uh, there was something really interesting in that exchange because of coming off of the Polar Boy election issue. It was kind of nice to see him step into leadership.
Right. Taking the reins.
Yeah,
He's being an active leader, and it may not be to everyone's liking, even us as the reader going, yeah, the whole Legion should go after the time trapper. That duh. But but as we said in story, that's probably not the best tactic.
right.
Oh, yeah. Cosmic Boy says, all I want to know is how Polar Boy picked the team. I can't figure out his strategy. I'm like, really? Because you've got two of the most powerful Legionnaires in
Mm-hmm.
Mon-El and Ultra Boy and Block in terms
And
of
Night
strength
Girl.
and vulnerability, Night Girl strength.
You could throw her in there.
Yeah. And Cosmic Boy with his, just his own, tenure as a Legionnaire. He's got
Mm-hmm.
a lot of history and strategy himself.
And he
So
was just part of the whole time trap,
exactly.
both time trapper stories.
Totally makes sense for him to be involved in this.
Right.
And then Sunboy, also a very powerful teammate.
That's interesting. I wrote questionable. But I guess you're right. I mean, you sort of would want Wildfire, but at this point, where is why? Nobody probably even knows where Wildfire is because he's off, getting a makeover. And Brainiac 5 is obvious because
Right.
he's totally like gung ho to do this, but he's also the smartest one.
And Invisible Kid is part of this,
Right.
which that may be that for me, that was, I had to think about that one for a second, but if you need to sneak around, the only other person that might make more sense is Chameleon Boy, but we already had a spotlight on him in the Universal Project. So,
right. And there's probably a very meta answer to it as well, which I'm sure we'll get to next chapter of why certain members were picked. I say we go then to the interlude with Element Lad and Polar Boy, just to wrap up that part of the.
Okay.
Oh, do you have something else on this?
No. Let's go on to that.
Yeah, because we can come back. Just because I think it's the one interlude that I really like, because it's actually connected to the larger story, and yet it also wraps up, I think, a point from the last issue. But it's page 22, where leader and deputy leader are behind on Earth, and basically Polar Boy's wondering, did he make the right decision? What did you make of that scene?
Well, this is definitely showing Polar Boy's hesitance in being a leader, his inexperience, which is I have a hard time with that concept with him because he's been a leader. He's with the subs. Granted, it's a different dynamic, it's a different team, etc. But he has more leadership experience than I think that Levitz is giving him since he joined the team, and especially since he's now become leader. Mm-hmm. So put that aside. My little complaint. This to me read more like the last scene that we had between these two. It's just a continuation of that. And with Element Lad kind of not propping him up, giving him a little bit more confidence by saying, hey, by the way, I agree with you, and this is the last time I'm going to do that, which I like that Element Lad did that.
Right. I felt it was almost a little bit of a passing of a torch, like more so than we got last issue.
Okay.
Especially because Element Lad was just leader, he's the deputy leader, and isn't that what you're supposed to do? Isn't the vice president supposed to be there to possibly answer some questions by the president? And I felt like it was a little bit of Polar Boy almost saying, you got this, because the one aspect that and Night Girl even says it early on, right, in that first sequence where she's like, look, when he was running the substitute heroes, Polar Boy was known for courage and intuition, not logic. But I kind of give a lot to intuition, right? I give a lot
Hmm.
to sort of your instincts, your impulses, your intuitions. And he has enough people on the team that can cover logic. So maybe in this one instance, it's almost like he's trying to say, okay, I know I'm right, right? And
Right.
Element Lad is like, yes, you are
Yeah.
correct.
Hmm.
Now shut up and lead the team. Because I think the big difference between being the leader of the subs and being a leader of the Legion is you now have an army as opposed to a small group.
Well, and a well-regarded army
Yeah.
for those that are, Legion supporters
Sure.
across the galaxy, not just what I guess I kind of consider the substitute heroes more of an Earth-based group,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
generally speaking. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a much different set of responsibility.
Yeah. So great. So, for being outside of the Superboy story and connecting to issue 36, great. It's nice to get that dynamic. It gives us the exposition like we talked about. And now we can get into, the whole big Time Trapper Superboy mess. So the very next scene would be the team actually going into the time stream in this new bubble, encountering a storm, winding up in Superboy's time, and we get our first Time Trapper interlude.
So I had a really big question about
Okay.
the time trapper and why is he doing this? What is his end goal? What why does doing these things in this way get what he wants? And what is exactly is that? Besides, I mean, he does say uh oh no, that's a different issue. Or maybe it's at the end. This is the problem with reading these things, and now I'm conflating different
Mm-hmm.
things. Oh no, yeah, at the very end of this issue, he says the time trapper shall rule eternity, and he laughs maniacally. But again, why? I that's these central questions.
Yeah.
What motivates this character, and how does this get him what he wants? I I've read all these issues, and I could not explain it to you
Right.
if I wanted to, even if I
Oh,
wanted to.
are you including the fourth chapter in that too?
Yes.
Oh, oh,
I mean,
okay.
just the details of this versus that.
Yeah.
It's an odd way of, and maybe that is intentional on the creator's part to obfuscate certain things, or it's a this is where I'm leaning towards. It is a means to an end for something that comes later in the
Mm,
run.
mm. And that I don't remember. I will say that it is a question that we've been talking about for a while. We talked about it in the Legionnaires 3. We talked about it in Cosmic Boy. We talked about when I did that really big Time Trapper deep dive. Um, and it doesn't get answered, at least in the three issues. And in fact, it slowly moves forward because, at the end of this issue, I was like, when we get the reveal of what Superboy's up to, I was like, okay, why? What's
Mm-hmm.
the urgency that he's flipped? It goes at the end of the second chapter, it goes even bigger because it's not just kind of like Superboy's acting weird and freezing people. He literally says Legionnaires need to die. What? That's at the end of the second chapter, which we'll get to. I was like, huh? And then by the third chapter, you get like a little bit more information. And like I said, I haven't read the last one, so I don't remember. And we don't necessarily get what the Time Trapper wants, other than he just wants to rule eternity. Now, at the end of the Cosmic Boy series, he did say that one of his goals was that he wanted to connect the end of time to the beginning of time by going backwards. erasing, expanding the end of time backwards to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know how any of this relates to that. I can't make the connection.
Right.
Um, the only thing I can kind of say is he's always been obsessed with destroying the Legion, and destroying the very idea of the Legion. So I guess the way you do that in this instance, especially with what we're going to learn in the third chapter, is you go through Superboy and hope that maybe it'll unravel everything, or he really will kill them, and that'll be the end of the Legion. And that means the Time Trapper can then rule, because I think when I did that deep dive, right, like there was always something about the Legion that is specific to the Time Trapper's very existence. And as long as they're a part of any kind of history, he can't rest. So this just feels like, just like it was teased at the end of the Cosmic Boy miniseries with the statues, if they were statues or if they really were Superboy and Crypto, remember they were just sort of like hanging there. This is like another tactic. It's another tactic to try to get rid of the Legion.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I just have a hard time still, I guess, seeing how it plays out. How does it work?
Right. I think the wrinkle is he didn't expect Byrne Superman to get involved. The only thing he really wanted was the Legion to go back into Smallville, which they do in this issue, right? And when they go back, Superboy is going to freeze them. We find out, not in the third chapter we find out, but why Superboy is doing it. But in this issue where Brainiac and his team escape and Superboy can't get to them, and then they wind up in the next chapter in Superman's Time Trapper didn't expect that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why
true.
That's why there's a wrinkle, and that's why it maybe feels like, what's going on? Why? Well, it's because none of this was expected, because the crisis wasn't expected, and nothing was expected, as we find out in chapter 3. So
yeah, I just that makes sense too. It's just, if his whole point is to get rid of the Legion, and oh God, can't talk about some things yet. I guess I can't. I don't understand why he can't do that. Why does he have to go through all this convoluted, these machinations? And I realize the time it's already been established. The Time Trapper likes to play games. He does it all the time. Did it in Legionnaires 3, did it with Cosmic Boy.
He says it right here.
He could have wiped him out.
Page 8, let the great game I set in motion so long ago be concluded. I shall grant their secret desire. Let them travel to the one time they surely felt was denied them. And in granting their wishes, I shall achieve mine. I will give them everything and take it all away. How sublime. I said it before, he is a bored megalomaniac, and he can't do things straightforward. So he has to pervert the very ideal of the Legion, because maybe in his mind, they're still going, if he kills them, say he gets rid of the Legion, well, their mythos still exists, right? People are going to mourn them, I guess, maybe.
Okay,
so
sure.
The best way to do it is to totally, if you have Superboy kill the Legion, everybody's going to go, what? Superboy killed the Legion? That's insane. And then everybody starts questioning their lives, I guess.
Sure. And yeah, if that was his goal, was to demoralize or destabilize in some way what the Legion is, what it represents, especially internally to the Legionnaires themselves, that would be far more relatable, far more explainable to me than whatever this is. And you said it just a second ago. The whole I shall grant their secret desire. Let them travel to the one time they surely felt was denied them. They don't even know certain things, so how could it how could they feel denied? Because we saw them in issue 23 go back to Superboy's past.
Well, I guess it's because he said in Cosmic, remember he warned Cosmic Boy,
Sure.
the next time you do this, there is no next time. I think he said to them.
Oh, okay. Okay. You're right.
Remember that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that
All right. And we are
tenuous.
we are at the
Right.
beginning of that. So yes. Okay. Hmm. That's a little, I guess,
That's the best I can give you.
highfalutin explanation, but okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm I'm done ranting about the time trapper's plan or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, when we again, listeners, sorry, I know we're not going to get to that third chapter, but that is where things get kind of more explained.
Yeah.
But it's in there where he says, you get a little bit more of that reasoning of the game
Sure.
and of he's the only one who sees it and he wants to relish in it until he gets what he wants. He just never counted on Burn Superman.
Mm-hmm.
And other things. Not only Burn Superman, but I think there's some other things that warrant why the plans don't work out. But we'll talk about that in chapter 3.
Yeah.
So he's a hard character to talk about. He feels a little different in this chapter than he does in Cosmic Boys miniseries or Legionnaires 3 when Giffen was more involved. His castle, his domain is different. It's suddenly all very otherworldly as opposed to being like a big citadel, So
he's like the Joker for the Legionnaires. Every time he shows up, he's a little different.
He's a little different, yeah. So that was hard. It was hard to like when you get to that page 8 and you're like, oh, why is he in this, bunch of floating platforms all over the place? Where's the decayed world? Where's the Edmund Hamilton zombies that work for him and the big citadel? So I was kind of disappointed because that grounds him a tiny bit to something, whereas this makes him a cosmic other. And he was touching on that in Cosmic Boy a little bit. He was being, much bigger, much grander. But I didn't want him to go all in on that. So I was that was a part of this where I was like,
I when you were starting down this path, I was thinking, you know what, this kind of makes sense given the connection to Crisis and what we find out a little bit later. So maybe he is. I tend to think of Time Trapper depending on how they're presenting him, because there's something way in the future about the Time Trapper that I never completely liked, but he is a bit of an elemental creature, and I think he kind of takes on different aspects depending on the forces that are pushing up against him or reacting to him in a way. So at this time, given the crisis, given what we find out later, he has to be this kind of time trapper to be able to do what he does now, as opposed to some guy in a hood who pulls Genghis Khan from the past to thwart the Legion that day, that kind of thing.
Right. No, that makes sense. And he does in this chapter. I mean, he toys with them, right? So the page 9 when they're trying to go through, or page 7 and 9 when they're trying to go through the time stream, and they hit they think they're going to the end of time. The years on page 7 are going backwards, not forwards.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about that because, like you say, they think they're going into the future.
Yeah.
and obviously they're not. Is that so that we dumb readers will know, or are they? I was just trying to figure out the point of that, so that I guess it's clear that they are going to the past, but when they show up in the past, we know that. So what's the big deal there?
Or is it a mistake? Because even
Or that's what I thought too.
on page 26, when Superboy's chasing them, quote unquote, from his time to the future, again, the years are backwards. Because it looks like he's arriving into the time stream in 1980 and the ship is already at 1970 when it should really be the reverse. So it's like,
Oh yeah. I actually think that's like a perspective thing that didn't go well.
yeah, I thought that too. I thought we were looking maybe at his backside, but the cape is facing away from us.
No, I
Oh,
think the bubble is supposed to be ahead of him, but it's higher up, and therefore it looks like it's going into the past
yeah,
when it's really not.
it's the
But yeah, the way it's drawn is confusing,
Ka-
regardless.
Karen Berger didn't do her job on those panels. Um, so they muck around, so they get into a time storm thing, and then he allows them to find their way, and that's when they wind up in Superboy's time, and um, I do like that Block even questions, it's like, well, even if we do go back in time, doesn't that mean we're going to the end of the time by going to the beginning? And Brainiac 5's like, yeah, okay, shut up, Block. Like, well, I can't get into it now.
I'll debate theory with you another day.
Yeah. So to your point about he has to be strong to do this, yeah, he does, because he has to be able to manipulate not only when they go, but where they go,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which we'll find out in another couple chapters. Makes a big difference. Okay, so they arrive in Superboy's time. We'll go to the interludes later. Let's get to the good stuff. All right, so they are in Superboy's time, just like in issue 23 when they went back for the Mon-El stuff. It is clearly a Smallville that is has to fit somewhere within like the 50s, 60s, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this is clearly not Burns' version of a young Smallville or young Clark in Smallville. This is the one we grew up with. There was the Daring New Adventures of Superboy that had just ended prior to the crisis, that was also set during this time. Lana Lang, Chief Parker, Pete Ross, the Kents, the Kent grocery store or whatever it is, the
General store, yeah.
general store. I mean, this is classic
Mm-hmm.
50s, 60s Superboy, all the way up to the 80s, where he had his own series 2 set in this time. So
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the scene where I was like, oh, there's all these little things and history referencing Legion Past and all this stuff. So I loved this for that
oh, cool.
aspect.
Do you want to name some of them right away?
Well, just to start off with, you were like late 50s, early 60s. Well, if you look at the movie marquee in the background,
Mm-hmm.
that is advertising the movie Houseboat with Cary Grant, which came out in November 1958.
Right.
And of course, Adventure Comics 247 came out in 1958. So we have that connection.
Very cool. Very cool. And then you have someone like Chief Police Parker, whose dates back to 1956. Adventure Comics. He first appeared at Adventure Comics 225. Of course, Pete Ross, honorary Legionnaire at this time. We get Lana Lang later. We get the Kents later. The thing that I liked about them going back, first of all, you get the common. They're time travelers in an older age, so they don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to cross a street. They don't, their smells are different. They're like, ooh, food that you grew in dirt. All of a sudden they forget how to be humans.
Right.
So
well, yeah, come on. I like that though. Night Girls, completely out of character to some degree if you think about her in the 1980s version
Sure. Right.
of history, or maybe there is a difference in atmosphere
Oh,
between.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
You
We'll
know,
talk about
so
that. Yeah.
so I just loved her naivete and her appreciation for, the ancient times where, like you said, they grow food in the dirt,
Right.
and the air smells cleaner, and all that idealized past kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I thought it was charming, but I totally understand. You're absolutely right. These these future people who suddenly are encountering a previous era, and suddenly they don't know how to do anything right. Yeah,
Right.
that's a bad trope.
Yeah. What I will say though is initial, and this is one of those, this is why I read my comics more than once. The first time I was like, oh, I just wish LaRocque and DiCarlo drew it better, made it more, made it more. I'm seeing Schaffenberger in my mind. I'm seeing
Yeah.
Kurtzma or whoever the artists were, right? And it's all very bright colors and thin lines and just it's almost like reading an Archie comic in terms.
Mm.
Nobody changes their, like, it's cool to see Clark Kent in the typical red sweater and the blue
Right.
pants, right? Like, it's okay, it's comic, got it. Then when I read it again, I was like, oh no, there's an uneasiness and a creepiness to this Smallville
Mm.
that I don't know if the creators necessarily put that in there, but maybe I did, because then it plays off when you finally get Superboy and
Yeah.
kind of like creeps into that. Like when they're all eating dinner, he sort of just like creeps in the background. He's like, oh yeah, I'm here. Hey, come to my basement. Kill slash, it's like suddenly a horror movie. And then he does, he puts it. So
Uh,
in a way, whether the creators intended or not, I kind of got the sense the second time around that I was like, oh, there's something really kind of off-putting about this Smallville now.
I
Maybe I'm reading into what's happening later, but I don't know. What do you think of
well,
that?
I will agree with you, especially when it comes to the Kents. And there's a couple things that I noticed in the later scenes that we'll get to.
Oh, sure.
I didn't. I mean, I didn't when I initially read this scene again after many years. I did not get the same sense that you just described, but I can totally see after reading through the issue, and then I did kind of key off that, rereading it with these scenes again, and looking for things to support that. And I didn't really see that here, except for maybe Pete Ross. Um, but I don't think that bears out.
Hmm.
But definitely, like I said, with the cants. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think we do bring a lot of what we find out uh, that we lay upon this scene and Smallville in general, and
Right.
well, I guess it even goes to the point of, like we're going to get to, and we've already mentioned, but is Superboy real? Well, is Smallville real? Are any of these people real? Are they automatons? Are they pale imitations? Whatever. So yeah, I could totally see how you could react or read into that kind of scenario. So, but that definitely gives Smallville a sinister quality for sure that I doubt we have ever seen Smallville depicted in that way before. So that's kind of neat.
They say it right there on page 12, right? I don't get it. This is Smallville, just like I remember it, down to the home of Superboy postcards. But how can this exist if Superman's history say he never was Superboy? Take my word for it, Cosmic Boy. This is really Smallville. You only visited. I lived here.
Right.
So
And yeah, go
that
ahead.
all that kind of set up the whole thing too, where they are. That's why I said they feel uneasy, because they're like, wait a minute, we know this exists, but then we've been told by Cosmic Boy, because he met Superboy, Superman, and didn't know who Cosmic Boy. Like, no, it doesn't exist. So why does it exist?
Yeah. Why hasn't anybody so far said, well, maybe that Superman you met isn't the real one?
Yeah, really. Why are they trusting the 1986 that he went to over what they've been going to since 1958?
I guess that comes back to when they first arrived. Is that right? Yeah, yeah. When they first arrived in Smallville, Night Girl says because Brainiac 5 is trying to figure out where they are exactly, and she goes, Superboy's time, right? And he says, how in the stars did you calculate that correctly, Night Girl? And she says, Brainy, sometimes open eyes are as effective as a computer mind. Look. And so, it's the same kind of thing. Cosmic Boy and Night Girl for that. Wait, did Night Girl actually interact with Superman in that story? I forget. I don't think so.
No, I think it was just Cosmic
Yeah.
Boy. Yeah.
So Cosmic Boy talked with Superman, and to him, that is Superman with this weird timeline thing going on. But he firmly believes with his being that was Superman. That was the future or Superboy's future self.
Right.
So again, it's just you trust your eyes, you trust your instincts. Go back to your point about Polar Boy, which is the whole reason they're here in the first place. So, it is a weird. I've said this before already, but it's a weird tension that they're kind of playing off of.
Yeah.
That they don't, and this is kind of my problem with this, and maybe with the Time Trapper too, is that. And usually I don't like this, but I kind of wish they would have been a little more explicit about some of these things. Instead of just kind of dipping their toe into it, and then that's it.
They do have 3 more chapters.
That's true. Yeah, I do forget that part. We got to fill the issue and continue the story elsewhere.
Yeah, and I guess too, because at the end of the Cosmic Boy miniseries, Time Trapper is, whether he admits that he's messing with time or he's, he kind of taunts them at the end of that miniseries, which makes them realize that history is being tampered with. And now we know, Cosmic Boy says, now that we know the Time Trapper is involved, we can be sure it's not an accident. So they are running back to Sunboy saying, how can you trust Cosmic Boy's supposition? Well, I understand that, but we have 2 conflicting things going on here. A Superman that says there's never a Superboy, and a Smallville that says there is a Superboy.
Right.
So now they just have to find maybe everything will work out the same way, whether Superman was Superboy or not, or if mankind stumbles a little, first using nuclear power or spaceflight, but I'll be damned if I'll trust it to the Time Trapper's good intentions. So, yeah, I mean, there's just, really, there's a reason why they gave a footnote for the Cosmic Boy miniseries. You really kind of had to read that if you want more backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Before we get too far ahead, Ultra Boy is the green sweater. Yeah.
Well,
he says
they supposedly, but they keep switching their dialogue back and forth.
Yeah. There's
totally
a few
messed it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he says, you only visited, I lived here. And so, of course, Ultra Boy is referencing his appearance in Smallville, his time living in Smallville, that was revealed in Superboy issue number 98. And then in the next page over on 13, Mon-El, talking to Chief Parker, reminds him that his name is Bob Cobb, a friend of the Kents, and that is from Superboy issue 89 in that famous story. So yeah, and Parker says, yeah, stayed with them a few years back, didn't you?
See, that first dialogue, I love those callbacks, but you're saying Ultra Boy says, take my word for it, Cosmic Boy, I've lived here. But they answer and they say, I'm glad we left the others guarding the time bubble, Mon-El. So in the sequence of the bubble, they think Mon-El's talking.
Yep.
So I think they just really mucked up the coloring.
They did, yeah.
And we have to make just like you did, we have to make, because they, in the later Superboy chapter, John Byrne chapters, they fix it. They give the proper, Mon-El's in the blue, Ultra Boy's in the green, because even when they meet the Kents, they're like, it's Mon-El, and they hug the guy in the green. That's not Mon-El, he's got brown hair. So yeah, they again, Karen Berger, what are you doing? you know? She's probably off wooing Neil Gaiman to come over to, do Sandman soon.
And before we move on, I did a little bit of this research. I just want to throw this in here because
Sure. Yeah, no, I love that.
It has nothing to do with the Legion though.
Okay.
So other than the scene, Night Girl gets an apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
From Mr. Jones there, right? And he tells Pete Ross that'll be 5 cents for the Macintosh. Anyway, so I looked this up, Peter, just because I was in a mood. A bushel of apples, which are about 125 apples, cost $1.74, according to a U.S. Department of Agriculture report issued in 1959. Right, so that puts an apple at about 1 cent each, by wholesale, I guess. Right, so Mr. Jones is charging a 500% markup for that apple.
Or Smallville in this universe is wealthy and everybody's got, no problems. And
yeah,
sure. I got a huge City on the Edge of Forever vibe when Night Girl was crossing the street and ready to get hit. I was like, ooh.
Wow, yeah. I'm embarrassed that I didn't even think of that.
Now, the other thing I wrote here, we keep saying, okay, Superboy can't exist because Superman says he was never Smallville, never Superboy. But that doesn't mean Smallville can't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be able to go back in time and there's still a Smallville.
Right. But this is the Smallville that is the home of Superboy with the postcards and whatnot.
Right, exactly. But if they didn't have any of that, like if you would just go back, it still would be Smallville. So yeah, you're right. It's because there's still all these Superboy elements that's why it doesn't work.
Pete Ross, when they meet up with the Legionnaires there, he mentions some Crisis stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Reveals that it's been weeks since that event, since Superboy apparently dealt with it and saved them all. I just find that notion of it's just been weeks, whatever that means. That could mean 2 weeks, that can mean 8 weeks. Who knows, right? They're intentionally keeping it vague, but given, I know it's all timey-wimey stuff, right? But given that the crisis happened almost a year ago in real time, and comic book time is always going to be different, but it's just been weeks from their perspective. So I don't know why I get a certain amount of delight from the idea that the crisis to them happened just a few or several weeks ago,
right? And
yet all we've been reading, or we've been talking about this run of Legion comics that encompasses this too, retroactively to some degree, for years. So I just find that really interesting. And what does that really mean for this story? And I think there's more to say about that later, perhaps.
Yeah. And, the Cosmic Boy saying red skies, almost like he doesn't remember, but they do remember, even if they don't remember the exact details.
Mm-hmm.
Because even post-crisis, there is a crisis. It just is a different sequence of events.
Yeah.
It's not all the universe. It's just, if you go to the history of the DC universe, the crisis is just the Anti-Monitor coming to Earth and wanting to supplant his antimatter universe into the positive matter. It's just simple as that. It doesn't have to do with multiple Earths and all that other stuff. So there still was a crisis, even post-crisis. It's just a different beast.
Was it that way at this time? When you say who's who, that you're talking about the first volume, right?
I'm talking about history of the DC universe.
Oh, history. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which we've already covered. Yeah.
Yes. You know what though? I seem to remember reading some issues back then, post-crisis issues, where it was sometimes people would remember and other times they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so it was a very weird existence for the crisis.
Yep.
Early on, post-crisis. And so this obviously is not early on in post-crisis time. So yeah, that's strange. But they do talk about in what was it, issue 16?
Mm-hmm.
The Crisis tie-in issue where we see Supergirl dying.
Well, that was right during the crisis, though.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But still, there was comments in that issue, I believe, where, people are like, well, how come we don't remember this? How come we didn't remember all this crisis stuff where we were actually there? Right. And so that whole idea of, did it happen? Didn't it happen? What's going on here? That is, it's interesting from the perspective of, if this were early on in the timeline of post-crisis events, then yeah, that would make sense, for them questioning it. But it seems like, I don't know, that goes back to the whole, it's only been weeks kind of comment. So it's like, where are we with this? And, even though it's 1,000 years in the future, it's like it's now.
Yeah. And even in the next chapter, Superman clearly mentions the crisis.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody has like a different kind of.
Yeah.
That's why
Burger.
That's where some of the. Well, no, I think that's more DC editorial because was a lot of the confusion. And this story doesn't help that in some ways.
Mm.
And then they go see the Kents, and on my first read, I didn't get their kind of off-putting. They're not right. So, you want to talk about that? Because I got it on the second read, but the way the Kents are reacting.
In this first scene, I did not get that. It's later that I was referring to.
Oh, I mean, even here, I sort of felt like it's Mon-El and some of the Legionnaires, huh? Oh gosh, it feels a little like they're covering. It probably is not.
Yeah. I can totally see that, especially the way Pa is looking at them, whereas Ma, has, well, I don't know. I was gonna say she has a bit of a smile on her face, but the way it is drawn, that could be seen as a forced smile. But then she goes in for the hug to hug Joe.
Where did you see it later?
On page 18.
Mm-hmm.
So this is when Clark appears. They're at the dinner table, and we get a little bit more history. I think that's Pa that says this. Yeah. Look at you, Cosmic Boy. You're all grown up since the day you came here to invite Clark to join your Legion in the future. And he talks about how proud he was. Cosmic Boy is talking about what you mentioned before about Superboy. He was the inspiration for the whole organization. He was the greatest hero in history. I hadn't keyed on that particular phrase until just now. Mm-hmm. He was the greatest hero. Oh, we got to come back to that. Probably in the next episode. Anyway, it's so Clark arrives. They're all shaking hands and hugging and kissing. And then you see the Kents there in the background, in the lower bottom right of that panel on page 18.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in a grayscale shadow tone, whatever. And the looks on their faces definitely keys off of what you're talking about. There is something up here. And it's so easy to, if you're just reading, you're casually reading this and you just blow by the background stuff, you're focused on the foreground and the dialogue, you might miss that. And them definitely saying, hey, by the way, red flag here.
Yeah, I missed it. I don't think I paid attention to them in that panel, but that's a great observation. Yeah.
And then, of course, a couple pages later, we find out that they are complicit in whatever's going on here.
Right. Son, are you sure this is the right thing to do? It's the only thing I can do, Pa. Don't let it trouble you. It's on my conscience. So this is where we find out, well, obviously the page before it where he traps them in a stasis. We find out that there is something going on. Something's going on his end as well. And we have to remember that they said early on to Pete Ross, when he talks about the crisis, he says to the Legion, is that why you're here? And they're like, no. What do they say? Frankly, we didn't intend to come to your time period. We were tossed here. So to go back to your whole thing again, Time Trapper purposely puts him there because he knows Superboy is setting him up for a trap. So that's why they are here, and that's why Superboy is going to enact whatever it is. I have no alternative. This is page 26. The Earth, Smallville, maybe the whole universe is depending on me. I won't let you down, Ma, Pa. I'll save you. Even if it means I have to track the Legionnaires through time until I've trapped each and every one of them. When I was like, oh, well, there you go. Time trapped. Like, he clearly, he's in cahoots with the Time Trapper, even if it's not clearly spelled out.
Well, I don't know how much clearer you could be based on those words.
Right.
The Trapper, right? I mean, if you hadn't suspected by now that there's some relationship between the Time Trapper and Superboy, I think this pretty well spells it out. And of course, we get corroboration of that later. But since we're on this page in this scene, Peter, I love this in terms of who Superboy is and who Superboy is to me, because even though he appears to be working with the Time Trapper, he's still doing it from the perspective or the position of he's trying to save everyone. And how Superman/Superboy can you get with that?
Right.
He's going up against impossible odds, and he only wants to save people.
Which is why I feel like, we want that answer of what is it that Time Trapper's doing that he could convert not just Superboy, the Silver Age inspiration of the Legion Superboy, which is a whole other level of morality and compassion. And, he's way above even Burn Superman when it comes to that. So,
yeah.
That was one of those moments where I was like, okay, they got to answer that, like somewhere along the way, that's got to be answered. So we'll see if that's in the final chapter, because it's the only chapter I haven't read yet. So,
can we go back to that scene when Superboy and the Legionnaires come to my basement? So this is where the Superboy is like, I'm the real guy. He says, I can give you all the Legion signals, even the secret handshake. But nobody could impersonate me well enough to fool you guys, except maybe Mon-El, and he's right here. So, again, little bits of Legion history, right? So I had to look these things up. The secret handshake, I believe, was first shown in Adventure Comics 290. I could not find reference in my research to what those Legion signals are. And so I'm like, what are they? What
baseball signals?
What? Yeah. What is it? Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? And how often do they have to do this? And then you have at the bottom of page 19, you have the Legion statuettes, which is what captures the attention of the assembled Legionnaires. And these things, the Legion statuettes. Oh, I could not find when they first appeared. All I know is I first encountered these statues in the composite Superman story in some reprint that I read of World's Finest 142. And that's the composite Superman is this janitor guy who I think lightning strikes them, and then he gets the imbued powers of all the Legionnaires from those statues, which were created using a ray of some kind that duplicated them, but as statue form. And yet somehow their powers were also part of the statues. Anyway, it's Silver Age goofiness.
Right.
But did you go through all the Legionnaires here?
Mm-hmm.
And who are we missing?
We're missing the Legionnaires 5, the new recruits: Polar Boy, Quizlet, Tellus, because Projector's there, but she's not Sensor Girl,
right?
And Magnetic Kid.
Yeah. No, and no Supergirl as well.
Well, she doesn't exist.
Does she though? we saw her in issue 16.
No, that's too far away. She don't exist anymore.
So it's those ripples of Crisis Time that have actually reached us without any overt reference to it. Okay.
And some letter writers are like, wait a minute, if you're doing a story about Superboy, where's Supergirl?
Mm-hmm.
But technically, she's Superman's time. She's not Superboy's time, right? Just because she's
Yeah.
Supergirl
Yeah.
doesn't mean that she's from Smallville of 1958, and she's not a contemporary of Superboy. She's a contemporary of Superman. So it makes sense that she
Yep.
would be part of
Yep.
it.
That
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
Yeah.
You're giving me a headache though.
Uh, one more thing here, page 15. Cosmic Boy says, "See you later, Pete. I hope." And I wrote, famous last words.
Oh, I missed that.
Because in many ways, he will not see him again.
That's right. Poor Pete Ross.
Yeah. And then we should just make mention, when he zaps everybody, he's going to go after the other Legionnaires that are hanging out at the time bubble. But Lana shows up, of course, because it's still a Silver Age story conceit, and that's going to delay him.
Although I just want to point out
Mm-hmm.
the way that she's shown, begging Clark, please, Clark, just a few minutes, right? Look how she's caressing him in that panel. That's not Silver Agey.
Oh, she did that all the time. She was always pawing him. Yeah.
What? No, not like that.
Trying to like kiss him and.
No, they were more
pouty.
chaste than that, Peter. Come on.
It was implied. But Pete Ross shows up, and I do just want to point this out because this is going to be conflicted later. He says he's warning them they got to go. He heard a scream from the Kent house. If some monster is powerful enough to attack Superboy, Mon-El, Ultra Boy, and the others, you've got to get the rest of the Legion. He clearly doesn't know that Superboy was behind the attack.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in your mind for the next couple chapters. So they decide to leave. And when they leave, they see Superboy attacks them. And he tries to put them in stasis, but they get away. And they're like, wow, what was that about? And that's when they wind up in the future. Or they're going somewhere.
Yeah, that middle section there, after Superboy tries to zap them with the ray.
Mm-hmm.
I love that procession of panels, especially the reaction of Sunboy, Invisible Kid, Block, although Block doesn't really react to anything, and then that final one of Brainiac 5. But and as they go through this, we see Superboy, and he gets, except for one weird panel here, they zoom in on Superboy's face until you see just his eye right before the panel of Brainiac 5's reaction. So you get Sunboy, he's like surprised. Invisible Kid also, he's like, what's going on here? I don't know how to read Block. But then Brainiac 5 is anger, like I've never seen on Brainiac 5's face before. The realization of what Superboy is doing is just wonderful. It's so, that's sublime.
Yeah.
In the way that's presented. And I think we get more of that too down the road as well. But just the betrayal, the apparent betrayal of their inspiration, the greatest hero of them all. And I just love that.
Brainy says, we must face the possibility, Sunboy, that there is no period in history that the Time Trapper's tampering has not totally corrupted.
Yeah.
So they are on the run.
So what does that mean if the Time Trapper has changed their past, for lack of a better phrase, and corrupted it, right? What does that mean? What are we then as Legionnaires if that is what this is now? So that's a very interesting idea.
To go back to, the demoralization of the team, of the very legend that they were based on, and then their very foundation, the Constitution, the handshakes, the signals. What does it all mean
if everything is built on a lie?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that I can get behind as a motivation for this. Yes.
The only other notes I have are about the interlude. So do you have anything else, or can we?
Well, one more thing. so that we get the last page here with the time trapper
Mm-hmm.
that we already touched on. But he says here, the Legion found their treasured past. Yes, Superboy may have his little world safe. I think that's key. May have, but as soon as they take their gifts, the Legion's gifts, they shall find they have destroyed time itself. Which maybe that's his. This is his explicit declaration of his goal,
Right.
right? But as soon as they take their gifts, so they've. How do you take that? What does that mean to you, Peter?
I think it just goes back to the what we said before. If Superboy wins, the Legion found their treasure, but Superboy may have his little world safe. He wants to save his world. The only way to do that is to give up the Legion to the Time Trapper or kill them, whatever. So he believes that wipes out the Legion, and Time Trapper feels like he can take on Superboy because it's just Superboy. It's not the Legion. So if the Legion wins, maybe he's thinking, does he think that if the Legion wins, Superboy's going to die or Smallville's going to go away, And then again, if that happens, well, there goes their inspiration. So maybe they don't exist. If he kills the Legion, they don't exist. Either way, I guess maybe he feels like he almost feels like he's in a win-win situation. But that's, obviously that's every villain's point of view.
Yeah. I guess I'm still confused, because I maybe I'm just getting stuck on what he's saying here. As soon as they take their gifts, what the gift was to let them go to their quote unquote past. So that's just, so is he just, yeah. So is he just extrapolating from that, the fact that now that they know something is up, that their inspiration has betrayed them. So he's being metaphoric here, I think. I was trying to figure out what the gifts part of it. We're taking the gift. I think that's the word. The problem I have here is the taking of this gift. They didn't really take it. He engineered them to be there. So anyway, I found that confusing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, I guess, the witch gives Snow White an apple, take it. And you're going to like, go ahead, take it. I'm still going to destroy you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. And then, okay, so final thing on this. Now let me bring all the players in the play together for the final act. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we go to the next chapters.
Okay.
All right. So you want to get some of these interludes?
Yeah, I don't want to spend long on these. The Labyrinth one I thought we didn't really need it. I mean,
no.
All they do is just drop Universal off. We saw them en route last issue.
Yeah.
We didn't learn anything new. It just felt like it was Levitz wanted to make sure to include all the Legionnaires. I think that's really what these interludes are. He's like, I want to make sure all 24 members of the Legion get some spotlight. And it's like, okay,
in this special story.
Yeah, but
it's not part of the special story. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Just for new readers or whatever.
Yeah, I felt the same way you did. I felt like we got what we needed out of the last appearance of these characters with Universo. We didn't need this little thing.
Yeah, I didn't learn anything new. Interlude 2 with Dream Girl, pretty splash page.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks Atmos is coming for. Well, we kind of know that it's Atmos because we can see him in the background. And then when we get to the who's who from this month, we'll get a little bit more to that.
I kind of hate who's who for that. It's happened a couple times now.
Yeah. But really, it's to show Dream Girl and to show off a pretty page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a good page.
Yeah.
I wish he was more creative in some of the other part of the issues. But.
That's funny you say that because one of the things I read in the Legion Companion now, and I'll talk more about some of the stuff in the Legion Companion in the next episode. But LaRocque, really, he himself said he wanted to take he wanted to put his best foot forward basically with this particular story.
Mm.
And so um, I think they rearranged some stuff for him not to have to do so he could really do this. And maybe it was mentioned in a letter column now that I'm thinking about it. But I, except for a few exceptions, I don't know that I would agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
So
Maybe it's good for him, for like what, but I still feel there was more potential. Every time we go into the time stream and we go into any sort of fantasy kind of thing or science fiction thing, I always want more.
mm-hmm.
You said you liked the third interlude with the science police.
Well, we get Schwan Aaron and Gigi Cusimano, and what I like about this is how they're kind of needling Devron,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of comes across as he has more. Well, he says I have basically he has more important things to do, but they're trying to get him to see like the bigger picture or to be to realize that you don't get ahead by complaining, giving him that career advice. But it just, what I like about this is that these two women who appear to be in places of prominence within the science police, that's just that idea of women in prominence in this organization, and the men, with maybe the exception of Chief Zendek, and I'm looking back on a lot of the appearances of the science police that we've read through the years.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really, the guys that we've seen they kind of come across as borderline incompetent. But the women do not, and I just like that reversal of expectations,
right,
in this scene represented by these characters.
Yeah, it's not far off from what Levitt does with the Legion itself.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Marilla Tal coming to Chiffon and Gigi. I have to imagine she's probably going to ask them what it's like to date a Legionnaire.
Yep. They failed the Bechdel test right there, I think.
I guess so. And then interlude number 4, we have Phantom Girl pounding because she's not with Ultra Boy in the past. Shrinking Violet saying, oh, stop mothering him, basically. Shadow Lass saying, hey, you haven't picked the best winners in boyfriends either. And then Dawnstar, who is not the first time where she's sort of been by herself commenting on the Legion as a whole, gets a surprise visit from Harry. And again, speaking about sort of like anticlimactic artwork, I think there was a better way to design this page to really show this.
Mm-hmm.
Wildfire's new look, from a connection from last issue where he went to Quizlet and said, hey, help me. And this is what we get.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Of his look?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I don't really have a reaction to it, honestly, because you don't really get a sense of, is this supposed to be Drake? Is this from when he, before he became Wildfire, as opposed to just like, here's a general energy like looking face. I don't know. It's okay. I guess is my reaction.
It's weird. You're expecting to see a visor.
Well, that's true. Yes, exactly. And when you say weird too, going back to some of the other stuff we said about the Kents and what I said about Superboy and the plastic looking face, I can kind of glom onto that idea with Wildfire. And of course, he comes to her thinking that she's going to be just impressed with his new look, and she has a very different reaction, I think, than he was expecting.
Yeah, because it's shocking.
Yeah,
it's immediate.
But it's just the way he said, "What do you think?" And he's got this smile on his face as he leans in towards her, and she's like, "What?"
Yeah, I'd be like, "Don't burn me." Like, what's going on? Yeah, it's a little
what
weird.
what I got from this, besides, okay, Wildfire's got a new look. What I really liked about this scene was the panel before the bottom two. As Wildfire comes up to her after she makes that comment about the other ladies in the room. I hope you don't mean me, Dawnstar. And Dawnstar's reaction or reply, without having seen him yet, no, Wildfire, never you. And that's the thing I really like, because this is, how do I say I love you without saying I love you? And I really enjoy that back and forth between these two characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, everything is subverted with her reaction to his new face.
There are a couple of responses in the letter column about this issue, but I don't think I'm going to read them because they'll make more sense once it's all wrapped up. I think they're better conversation points for later. One of the letters in this issue, though, in this specific issue, in response to a letter by Anderson, Paul Levitt says, it's basically they're talking about the origins of how people from Earth went off and colonized other worlds and stuff like that. And Levitt says, I posit the discovery of mutagenic chemicals that assist humans in adaptation to their environments, allowing for forced evolution over a generation or two, as opposed to over, thousands of generations. And I was like, well, that sounds an awful lot like the inspiration for Invasion and Valor. So I was like, wow, there you go.
That's funny. That's exactly what I was thinking when I read that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what they explored. I wasn't even thinking about the timeline, the publishing timeline of this.
Okay, so we're going to break format a little bit, and instead of just jumping in right to the next chapter, we're going to just go to another feature that we haven't done in a while, and that is taking a look at various Legion-centric characters in Who's Who. Because in May of 1987, we got Who's Who Update 87, number 1 of 5. So they did a 5-issue follow-up to the original Who's Who series. So we get a chance to look at anybody that's Legion related in this issue, which means we can talk about Atmos, Black Mace, Caress, and initially I said Booster Gold, but there wasn't really anything in the Booster Gold entries when we got to it. So
yeah.
Like,
yeah. In fact, I didn't even write anything down for him.
Neither did I. I think we've talked a lot about him in previous episodes, so that by the time we got to this, it was like, oh, there's nothing really there Legion related.
Mm-hmm. This is great because this update 87 for Who's Who, I have had purchased only recently, really, in comparing to my overall time of reading and buying comics. But I've never gone through them. So this is going to give me a wonderful opportunity to read through and figure out, or to find out what these updates were for these characters at that time. So
right. Most of these updates most of the entries were pulled from the many, many, many letters that Who's Who got from the first volume of, well, where's this character? And where's this character? And where's this character? And either those characters were neglected because of memory, because of space. So those characters have made their way into this update. There's also a lot of characters that were revised because of the crisis. So they needed all new entries for that as well. Right. And this volume was kicked off with an ad that said, "Who's new in the DC universe?" And it was an ad drawn by Mr. John Byrne. Because if you bring him over to do your Superman books, you got to have him do other things as well. And it's a house ad that has shown up in a bunch of comics at the time, and it features, Booster Gold front and center. A lot of like the young all-stars are on it. some characters from Titan, some characters from Outsiders. Atmos is in it, actually, makes an appearance in it, and a whole bunch of other characters that are either new or weren't in the first volume. So to tie into our overall theme of this episode, it's kind of cool that there was a John Byrne ad.
Yeah, I vaguely remember this ad, and I just was flipping through our last issue that we just talked about, Legion 37, and wondering if that ad was in there, but I didn't see it. So yeah, I'll have to go back and find that ad copy to see what specifically what you're describing there.
So the three characters, Atmos, Black Mace, Caress, they all show up on the cover. And we kick it off with Atmos, as drawn by Greg LaRocque and Mike DiCarlo.
Well, before we get to that, since you mentioned the cover, because I didn't realize this, as I looked it up, who did the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And on the back side, it's just simply Bro/Gio for Giordano, but I didn't get the Bro part of it. And this is Joe Brozowski.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with that artist's name.
I think he did one of the entries we talked about before, and it was another one of those. Who is this guy?
Yeah, okay.
But he's done, some things at this time. Not a lot.
That's interesting though that they would give him a cover to, all these different characters for the DC universe. So
right, and not someone like, well, not Perez, not
Byrne or
Byrne, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Atmos.
What did you learn about Atmos?
What I found interesting about Atmos, and again, my complaint about Who's Who, because we don't get this. Well, I don't believe we got this much detail about Atmos in the pages of Legion, which what I'm referring to specifically is so it says here Xanthu used Naltorian techniques. I thought that was interesting. Naltorian science to create Atmos, designed to create. He was designed they designed Atmos to create a Daxamite or Kryptonian like hero, like how Starboy was initially when he first showed up. He had basically all the powers of Superboy. And they also mentioned that he has been active for several years before the Universal Project. We just haven't seen him. So I love that idea of, Xanthu decides, hey, Starboy is not available anymore. We need a planetary champion. So let's go make one.
Yeah.
And also considering the Naltorian aspect of this, is that somehow tied to how Dream Girl made Lightning Lass into Light Lass? So a similar technique, or how does that? How is there a connection there? I guess
maybe that's why he has a connection with Dream Girl.
Oh wow! I didn't even think about that. There you go.
Yeah, you got to watch out for those Naltorians. They're up.
Yes.
Yeah, he completely comes across, because there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of information that is new for the Who's Who, which makes sense. But he really comes across as like a Captain Atom, a Firestorm, Atomic Knight in some ways, especially because of his personality. Like I like in the power section where they say he has faced no foes with powers equal to his own, and so has been able to rely totally on his special abilities over, say, physical ability, fighting prowess, But that just makes him feel like he has an ego, which he does. And the Atomic Knights thing is just, he has a kind of, not just a superhero quality, but he has a kind of like a royalty aspect because of his station. And
right.
He's the hero. Like when we read that Starboy issue, and he has his own apartment and they treat him like a king practically. So yeah, he really comes across like that, even though we've barely read issues with him.
I'm actually very much looking forward to reading more about him. And I hope they don't just make him a one note like that. He's got a big ego, and he's got a thing for Dream Girl. I'm concerned that's all we're going to get from this guy, but hopefully I'll be proven wrong.
He is believed to be en route to Earth to attempt to resume his relationship with Dream Girl, which is connects right to the issue we talked about with Dream Girl having her premonition. So very cool that these two issues lined up.
Which came first? Do we know? August? No, they're both August cover date, right?
The issue, they both were the same week, apparently.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, good.
Black Mace, excuse me.
Yeah, different timeline there.
Yeah, a character that we talked about in that one flashback issue right before the Universo project. This is drawn Greg LaRocque and Romeo Tangle, and a character that you are more familiar with than I am.
Only because I've read just a few issues in which he's appeared, but I have always liked this character. I think I already talked about this in that previous episode. There's something about characters with maces that I particularly love. So, speaking of that flashback issue, they did incorporate that bit of unknown until then history, into his entry. I thought that was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. First appeared at Adventure Comics 374. He's been around since 1968.
Yeah, and I think my first issue was somewhere in the 1970s when he made an appearance in a backup tale involving Timberwolf. And what do you think of? So here we get to see Greg LaRocque being inked by somebody else, besides DeCarlo. So what do you think of this rendition of LaRocque's work?
Honestly, the main figure, if you would have put that in front of me and said, who's the artist, I would not have guessed LaRocque.
Right? That's what I thought too.
Yeah. Some of it is just the choice of positioning of the character. He's not standing upright. Some of it is also the inking. Yeah, I would not have known. And I honestly didn't learn anything about the character that I didn't already know from the first time I read him in that flashback issue.
Well, I don't know if I knew this before or what. I can't remember now, but I knew he had super strength of some sort, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it says here, sufficient to challenge any Legionnaire in combat except Superboy or Mon-El. And so, that he's pretty strong. Given that,
right?
Of course, a lot of the Legionnaires don't have super strength, so I guess it's not really that big of a deal.
And then Caress, and this one as well, as drawn by Greg LaRocque and Mike DeCarlo again. Another more recent addition to the Legionnaire mythos as of Legion of Superheroes 25 during the Censor Girl stuff.
Is she newer than Atmos?
Yes.
So on her, let's see, read the part.
Oh, wait. The way you worded it. No, she's older than Atmos.
Okay.
Atmos was in 32.
Yeah. Okay.
She's in 25. Yeah.
I'm supposed to read something here. Hold on in my notes. Yeah. Having rejected the science police and other forms of lawful employment, she chose only those causes outside the norm of society, feeling them more challenging. So I don't remember that being part of the story, that she was involved with the science police or was part of the science police at one point.
She got her powers from the Kuns.
Yeah.
This is all new information.
Yeah. And why would you, okay, so she does this job for them. And the condition is, if I do this, then you give me cyborg superpowers, and they give her an acid touch. Why would you choose that? Assuming she had a choice, right? Just what an odd thing. This is obviously just an example of, well, we got to give her a backstory. So, and her powers are this. Well, that's okay. This is what we're going to do.
And do we see her again?
Right after that the initial appearance, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah, are there any other Fatal 5 stories in this run?
I really couldn't tell you.
Okay. We'll have to keep an eye out for that, I guess.
And they even give her a name, Shi-San.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like her design. I just wish she would have had a better power. And
Well, she's effectively Mano,
oh, right.
right?
Yeah,
So I guess that works.
you're right.
Even though she has an acid touch, but she wears gloves.
Or her skin. She's almost like Dr. Bones or Mr. Bones.
Yeah,
Or,
Mr.
yeah,
Bones. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I do. I do like her design. Now, in the Who's Who coloring, though, she should not have pink skin because I went back and looked. She had the traditional whatever they design Asian coloring on the.
Oh.
It was a little more yellowish
Mm-hmm.
in the original Legion story, and her name is Chi San, so it sounds like she is some Asian descent.
It's interesting though that whole she says she began her career as an adventurous and mercenary. I I'm impressed that they're giving her so much of a backstory that I find interesting, and I want to know more about this character. But I don't think we, like you said, I don't think we do
I
get
don't
any more
think
of
we
her,
do.
right?
No.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
She could have given this history and this potential uh anti-hero quality. There could be a whole lot they could have done with this character.
They probably should have just done a Fatal 5 entry, a new Fatal 5 entry,
Oh, and then
as
mentioned her.
opposed to as opposed to doing I don't think she warrants having her own. Black Mace, sure. He feels like he's been around. Atmos, sure. He's going to have a few issues coming up,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Caress, meh. In terms of the update, you probably could have skipped that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really it. That's what we do with that section. We'll continue with that for another 4 more issues, just to see who shows up from the
Mm-hmm.
Legion of Superheroes.
Who shows up?
Who's who? All right, let's go to the second chapter of the Superboy story. This is Superman number 8. It was released a week after Legion of Superheroes 37 during John Byrne's run. You have a synopsis for us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Superman number 8, titled Future Shock, the second part of this 4-part story. John Byrne story and pictures. Carl Kessel inking. Tom, I want to say Zuko coloring. John Costanza lettering. Carlin and Helfer are the editors, with a cover by Byrne and Kessel, which homages Byrne's, I guess that's what you say, Byrne's Fantastic Four 249 cover with Gladiator and the defeated Fantastic Four in the same positions that they're showing in this on this cover. So I thought that was interesting. Anyway. This is a very brief synopsis. While visiting Smallville, Superman detects the arrival of the Legionnaires who escaped from Superboy in the previous issue, number 37. When he arrives at their location to investigate, he accidentally, quote unquote, attacks them and they fight for several pages. Brainiac 5 stops the fight after he realizes that it is Superboy or Superman they're fighting. Superman demands to know who they are, and Brainiac 5 recounts the Legion's first appearance when they recruited Superboy. He also tells Superman about Cosmic Boy's encounter in the altered to him past, and then the events of Legion of Superheroes 37, including verbatim dialogue for the most part. It's then that Superboy arrives, placing them all in stasis. He declares that the Legionnaires must die so that the whole universe can live. So there's that. You had mentioned that earlier about the Legionnaires having to die.
Right. Something a little bit more than what we've gotten so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is that cover an homage, that Fantastic Four issue was entitled Man and Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Because Gladiator was basically a Superman stand-in. Well, the entire Gladiator and the Imperial Guard are Legion of Superheroes stand-ins
right
in the Marvel Universe. So
Do you think that's why he redid the cover?
To go back to why Polar Boy picked these characters, Byrne wanted to do the Fantastic Four, and he chose
Mm-hmm.
the Legionnaires that most represented the Fantastic Four. I don't know which came first. He wanted the characters and then was like, oh, or he's like, hey, I have a real cool idea for the cover. Can I use these characters?
Yeah,
I don't know which
yeah.
way came first.
That would be really cool to know.
And he does that a lot, when there was that supposed reunion in quotes between Claremont and Byrne on JLA in the like 2000s, I think it was. And I say supposed reunion because it wasn't a collaboration. It was literally Claremont wrote a script, Byrne drew it. That's it. He said there was no communication between the two of them whatsoever.
Mm.
But it was entitled something to do with 10, with the Roman numeral 10, just so he could draw giant X's all over the place, like the X-Men. And if you look at the covers, you're like, okay. And again, when he did Next Men sounds like X-Men,
Mm-hmm.
And then he did a book called Trio, which is kind of like
Right. Yeah.
Fantastic Four. You know what I mean? Like he thinks he's being clever and going, no, that's not what that means. It's like, come on, dude. Just, we get it. We get what you're trying to do.
Well, he kind of continues that pattern, I guess, in his Star Trek. Can't remember if it was Star Trek New Adventures or New Voyages, or anyway, it was him taking stills from the actual episodes and then making a story around the choices he made for those pictures, right?
Mm,
And then adding some new things. But it's just I'm taking something old and making something new out of it.
right.
Sorry, this is not the anti-burn podcast, but
No, it's a trope. It's a thing he does, like I get it. So it was JLA issues number 94 through 99, and it was called The 10th Circle. And
I think I have read that.
yeah, and every cover has some X on it for 10, but it also is like, oh yeah, remember when I drew the X-Men?
I'm gonna have to go back and revisit those then.
It's
I,
when
I I honestly don't remember anything about them other than the title of that story.
yeah, he reintroduces his version of the Doom Patrol in it.
Hmm.
That's where we get that. So, all right. So, general thoughts on this issue. Why don't you go first this time?
Oh boy. So one positively, I like how Byrne draws the Legionnaires.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Whereas comparatively, LaRocque, I noticed sometimes I had a hard time, other than they were wearing something different. I don't think I could tell Mon-El from Ultra Boy, for example, just by looking at their faces, right? And
When they were out of costume, especially.
yeah, exactly, yeah. But Byrne draws them distinctively. I love how he draws Superboy. We get to see Superboy at the end because Superboy looks like a younger version of Superman. He's not drawn like a thinner adult version of Superman, which is what we actually see quite a bit throughout the Legion's history, in, like, I'll say the 70s, maybe even the early 80s, depending on who's drawing, right? It depends.
Right.
But I like that. I like the choices he makes in terms of the characterizations of these folks. Plus going back, looking through this for the repeated scenes that we saw in issue 37, Pete Ross is certainly a lot more emotive, and you get a better sense of urgency on his part, or a better sense of fear than you do in issue 37. So I appreciate the art. However, my problem with this is that, one, there's just one big fight scene between Superman and Legionnaires for several pages at the beginning, and then two, we get several pages of things we just read in issue 37. I understand why they would do it that way, in case people didn't pick up issue 37, right? So you're just collecting Superman. Oh, here's this encounter with the Legion of Superheroes, and you get all the stuff that you need for that story, especially if you entice them to go pick up issue 37 and start from the beginning. But in reading these as I did in preparation for our discussion, it's like, wow, I could just kind of breeze through this because there's not much here that's new, other than different camera angles for the same scenes, right? So he does play it up. He does play with it, so that it's not an exact duplication, but it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I mean the once we get past the origin story of the Legion of Superheroes and updating all the way up to the Cosmic Boy miniseries, which is really for the new readers, for all the people who came over maybe from Marvel to read the Superman books just because it was John Byrne, for maybe lapsed DC readers who were coming into it because it was a new,
Mm-hmm.
okay, totally fair enough. Then we get from page, it's really only 17, 18, 19, and part of 20. That is the reprint from 37. And the page 18 and 19 are exact recreations, like same panel compositions. He just looked at what Greg LaRocque did, or maybe they sent him the pages and he redrew over. I don't know what he did. Yeah, it was really interesting once we got to that. It was like, even the dialogue's the same. Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's not all the book, but I was kind of okay with it. One thing I will say about what was kind of cool about seeing the two different versions, Byrne's placement, or whether it was Byrne or whether it was John Costanza, their placement of word balloons is better in the Superman books than it is in the Legion books.
Yeah.
For instance,
Which is interesting because it's the same letterer.
oh, that is interesting. Byrne is usually smart about when he's drawing, like sometimes I swear I've seen original art where he draws the word balloons. And as a way to kind of say, here you go, letterer, that's where the word balloons are. But for instance, on the top of page 19, the panel with Pete Ross and the Legionnaires in that one, those two word balloons, Easy Pete, Catch Your Breath, You Need to Know What Happened to the Others. In the Legion book, they are right over the heads of Brainiac 5 and Sunboy. But in this one, they're moved over. It makes sense to do it this way because in the Legion issue, there's a huge gaping space up there of like nothingness, right? Because the word balloons are over here. And there's a couple other times where the word balloon placement in this Superman issue is moved off of the bodies of some people, and it's pushed off to like the side, or off to artwork that you don't mind being covered.
Mm-hmm.
So on that aspect, I was like, oh, that's interesting. You could use these pages almost like study guides. Like, here's one way to do it. Here's another way to do it.
Right.
And most times I kind of prefer the way it's done in the Superman.
Yeah. I agree. I agree for sure.
Yeah. Very interesting. What did I write? Surprisingly, a lot of flashbacks and exposition. Yep. Now here's where I started with this thought, and then the thought picked up because of something I read in a future letter column about this issue. I said, in a way, these flashbacks make sense. You're recounting the origin because that's how the Legion remembers it. And you're giving readers a status quo, longtime readers. You're giving them a status quo, especially for newer readers. For longtime readers, you're telling them this origin still is intact. It's almost a way to say, all right, your big question is, what are we doing with the origin? Well, guess what? It's still the same. How we get there is a whole other issue, but the origin is still the same. So I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was a nice kind of way to appease readers. And I think longtime readers would not pick that up because they've read the origin. Maybe they've read the origin before and they would go, oh, it's just the origin again. Yeah, but what you're not thinking is they didn't change it. You were so
Mm-hmm.
worried about they were going to change. Well, guess what? They don't change it. Outside of a few things, here and there, like it's supposed to be Lightning Boy, not Lightning Lad, right? Because like little stupid things like that.
Right.
And like in the original story, the headquarters are in Smallville, but in this story, it's in Metropolis.
Yeah.
The headquarters are in Metropolis, which I thought, okay, makes sense. They're updating things a little bit. Okay, fine. So here's another reasoning why they do this. We are post-crisis. We are with a new Superman. They do this very same thing with Superman in Action Comics 650, so much, much later, because it's a celebration, issue 650. And there's a part in it drawn by George Perez, because that issue I think was even written by George Perez, where the Justice League Europe, I think, one of the international ones, are recounting Superman's origin with the Justice League, but it's post-crisis. So they start saying he wasn't one of the originals, but he said, look, if you ever need me, I'll be around. They show a beautiful page of the Justice League with the new gods and Justice Society and him helping them on various missions. And in a way, it's meant to say to the readers, these stories still exist with a slight little twist to them, So especially when you got to Byrne drawing the Fatal Five and Byrne drawing the Legion of Superhero Villains and Byrne drawing Time Trapper, I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like a tour through some of the stories that Superboy would be a part of. And it reminded me of that Superman issue in Action Comics. So I thought that was kind of cool because this is what you need to do post-crisis. You need to explain. And there's a hell of a lot of explanation in this issue. And Byrne is great at explaining. So whether for the good or the bad. So all of that made me feel like this is very necessary. Even for people who think it's not. I was like, okay, you have to lay out the very existence of the Legion to better understand why it's being reworked and why the Time Trapper is tearing it down.
Mm-hmm. Especially in this new volume of Superman where he never was Superboy, right? So if you're coming into it, because, like you said, because you came over to DC because John Byrne is now doing Superman, or you haven't read Superman comics before, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. That makes a lot of sense to go over all this stuff.
And here's the letter column missive that I was like, oh, this is great. And we both sort of touched on this. And I didn't write down who actually said it. The retelling the origin story is a setup for the final goodbye to the Superman and Superboy of old. It's a celebration of all the Superboy mythos that we've seen so far. So think about it. We've seen Smallville. We've seen Pete and Lana. We've seen supporting characters. We've seen the Kents. We've seen statues. We've seen the origin story. So it's like, yeah, whether the writers meant it to be that way or whether it's just happenstance, all of these things are part of Superboy's continuity. And if you didn't know where these four issues were going to end, they basically are giving you a celebration of the Superboy that we have always known in a weird sort of way.
Yeah. So do you think, because I don't remember, I can't remember my reaction to this at that point. I probably wasn't even thinking about it. I was probably just reading it for plot at that point.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you think that some people perhaps were even reading this as, since this is a celebration of that past, that history, and yet we have this weird dichotomy of it's there, but it's not. Do you think that they may have thought, oh, they're going to restore it?
Quite possibly.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, retroactively, that's how I would take this.
Yeah. Or they are going to come out of it and say it's going to be okay, even if the two are different.
Hmm. Hmm.
Superman, Superboy, all of this is going to still be in play.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just don't know how yet, because that's in chapter 3, which we're not going to talk about today. And then the last notion was this might be the first time I ever read the origin story, quite possibly.
Really?
Who was reprint outside of the Blue Ribbon Digest?
Yeah.
Who was reprinting 1958 comics?
Hmm.
And the few digests that I have did not include this story.
Ah, okay.
There was no trade paperback. I was trying to think of maybe one of the Legion issues. Was there a celebration where they reprinted Adventure Comics 247? Right? Yeah. I don't think so. This might very well be the first time I read the origin story.
Hmm.
So
I'm pretty sure I read that story in a DC Digest. It may not have been a Legion Digest. It may have been a Superboy Digest that I have.
maybe, yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to go back and figure out which one that was.
My preliminary search of the ones that I had, I was like, no, they're not in yet. So I all this is to say, when I reread it, and I said to myself, oh, it does have value for me because I need that. I
Yeah.
needed that information as a kid. I probably didn't have it. And there's something else that
Mm.
connects to that origin story that I believe we will get to in chapter 3. I don't want to spoil that just now. Let's talk about Byrne doing the Fantastic Four. Do you have any notes or anything, any comments about that?
No, actually, I don't.
Okay.
Other than the cover, I hadn't really didn't go beyond that. So, um, but flipping through it just now, I could totally see the power sets, obviously. What I don't know is, are these stand-ins for the Fantastic Four, Block, Sunboy, Invisible Kid, Brainiac 5? Are they behaving like those Fantastic Four members
I think
would
they are.
in the situation? You think
Yeah.
so?
Because Sunboy is coming off way
Yeah.
hugely as a hothead, no
Yeah.
pun intended.
That one I definitely agree and see.
Absolutely.
But I think the others may not have really been given a whole lot to say or do.
I think Brainiac 5 does because he is
Yeah.
constantly trying to diffuse the situation and either explain the situation or try to figure it out. And
Hmm.
it does feel like a Reed response. Block is really just because of the strength and tossing things around and fighting mano a mano. And the only thing I could say about Invisible Kid was that he did nothing, and it felt like kind of like the early Sue Storm who did nothing, who kind
Oh
of,
boy.
when you read those early stories, stood
That's
off to the
true.
side.
That is true.
That was the only thing I could really pull from that.
Yeah.
Really, I think it comes down to Sunboy and Brainy more
Sure.
than anything.
Yeah. Well, part of what threw me in this comparison is Block. They're on page 10. Superman's hitting him, and they're both thinking to themselves. Which I miss thought bubbles. But Block he is recovering, yet he seems not to be as strong as I remember. I that's not something I would associate with Ben Grimm, but I admittedly have not read a lot of Fantastic Four.
Mm, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's very surfacey, very
Yeah, yeah,
surfacey
yeah. Hmm.
outside of Sunboy, who So the whole thing is let's put a little structure to this. So we're in Superman's time, current DC continuity, 1987. In the previous issue, we talked a little bit about this. He fought a character that had absorbed massive amounts of solar energy, became a Hulk-like character called Rampage. Superman thought it was Lois Lane. It winds up being somebody else. And the only way to end the situation is he has to absorb the energy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what tosses him to this adventure. Basically, he runs away to Smallville to recuperate. And his powers are slightly on the fritz, right? His heat vision is going off without him controlling it. That's how he gets into the whole battle with the Fantastic Four. I even think that's why I have a theory. I have a larger theory. I'll hold off on that. So he's hanging out with Lana. Lana knows his origin story. He has a picnic with the Kents. There's a lot of teachy moments going on. Byrne loves to teach, right? Lana says, "Hey, why are you wearing those glasses?" Well, Byrne's going to tell you. It's because he's so used to wearing them, and that's why he wears them. You know, it's like, teach, teach, teach. And then they're like, the Kents come, "Hey, we brought food." "Now, Ma, you know I don't really ever get hungry." You know, teach, 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 teach. You know, it's just, Byrne loves to do that. He loves to throw out things about. There's so many other examples of it that we'll get into, especially in the next chapter, in chapter 3. While this picnic is going on, that's where he's like, "Oh, I hear something on this far side of town." I love that shot when he becomes Superman, and I love the shot of the quarry.
Mm-hmm.
The whole book is beautifully drawn.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just stunning, just great. All that 80s John Byrne stuff. I saw a review where somebody was like, "Oh, this is where Byrne was past his prime, blah, blah." I was like, what? Are you smoking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-mm.
So he gets in this fight, and what I love about the fight, especially personified through Sunboy, is a notion that we've talked about a lot. If you only have one power, it better be utilized in the most amazing way or in the strongest way possible, because you are the personification of that power on the Legion of Superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And twice we get the notion from Superman that Sunboy's fire is as hot as the sun, and then later it's like 10,000 more times hotter than what he felt the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I love that notion.
Yeah.
I love that that's what the Legion is about. I love that they surprise him. Their tactics when they fly up around him, block, who should not be as strong as Superman. Or maybe he is, because if he can go toe-to-toe with like the pre-crisis Superboy, maybe, you know, who knows? Maybe Block is stronger than we're giving him credit for, although I think it's just for this story.
Well, and you know, to put it in within continuity, you know, Superman is probably holding back because he doesn't know what's going on, and you know, he's assessing the threat, and
he just, like I said, went through that adventure where his powers are a little bit possibly on the fritz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's being careful.
Yeah, and he's a much more thoughtful Superman. He doesn't, you know, he's not going to go into, you know, fists ablazing. But I just really dug. That was the part where I was like, oh, wow, you know, whether Levitz helped Byrne or Byrne this is just Byrne being Byrne. Like, just the way he handled the Legion was really well. It was well done. I totally could like that.
Was this the first time that he had really taken on the Legion? We talked about his cover to, I forget the issue, in the Legion of Superheroes run.
That was the last issue, 36. Yeah.
36. Okay. Yeah. Which I was not all that impressed by, as I recall. But, you know, so I my assumption was this is the first time that he actually got to draw a bunch of the Legionnaires.
Right. Outside of like Legends with Cosmic Boy.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like he's done a tremendous job here, and not just, you know, just his draftsmanship, but his storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to pick on LaRoque. This is a much, even though I have problems with this issue because of the duplicate information, I found this a much more compelling, much more interesting storytelling experience than the previous issue, issue 37. Yeah.
And it goes back, you know, again, that sort of uneasiness, right? We're put into Superman's position of he doesn't know who these characters are. Mm-hmm. They're highly aggressive. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing. Why am I getting beat up on? Right? And
And why are you calling me Superboy?
yeah, you're right. Why are you calling him Super? Meanwhile, they call him Kal-El a couple times. He's not worried about that. He's worried about when they call him Superboy. Then they lay this origin story on him. He's still sort of not impressed by it, right? Like on the page 17 when they get into the Smallville stuff, he's like, they know about Ma and Pa. What can this all mean? It's like some crazy Twilight Zone version of my life. The Red Skies reference, but yet he knows Pete Ross. He knows the Kents. He knows Chief Parker, which I thought was cool that there's a Chief Parker post-crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't ever really get to totally believe them because that's when Superboy attacks them,
Right.
And it's not until really next chapter that he learns more information. So again, it's another one of those issues of an uneasiness. There's a lot of conflict, no resolution, because so much has to be explained, and it has to be explained to him and the readers.
So do you think this is a good second act of a 4-act story?
I preferred chapter 3
Yeah.
to chapter 2.
Sure. But that's because we get a bunch more reveal or revelations, I should say.
Yeah.
And a resolution to a part of the conflict.
Yeah.
I would think.
And it's that part of the post-crisis DC universe that at the time I loved, but I could see now, reading decades removed, that people didn't want their history explained. They want to see it, or they want to live it. They wanted to experience it, right?
Oh, as opposed to recounting it.
Recounting in a flashback. Oh, by the way, that story. Oh, yes, that's it. It's like, well, maybe that's why they did the Who's Who updates. Maybe that's why, they did a lot of origin stories post-crisis, or new series cut from whole new cloth, giving Adam a new series, but putting him in a whole totally different thing. And the Longbow Hunters, putting Green Arrow in a whole new thing,
Yeah.
Doing Hawk World, doing a new Justice League, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we don't want to get it. I think I read it somewhere. It's like, they don't want to get caught in a endless cycle of having to say, is you is or is you ain't my baby? Is this in continuity or is it not? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Let's just it's kind of like what DC did with Infinite Crisis. Let's just go 1 year later and start like a whole new thing. Mm-hmm. So I get it. Reviews of this issue were like, God, it's just a bunch of recaps. But if there's new people reading it, they're not recaps. They kind of need to be here if you're trying to explain the Legion's role, not only in Superman's life, but in DC continuity as well. So the craft of the book is great. The purpose of the book is understandable. I don't hate it. It's not my favorite chapter.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be the 4th favorite chapter. I can see where it's necessary, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question for you.
Yes.
So this goes back to something you said earlier. But I'll start with this first. So, like I said, at the end of issue 37, Time Trapper says, now let me bring all the players in the play together for the final act. To you, does Time Trapper place the Legionnaires in Superman's timeline, in his universe?
I don't know. I want to say no, because Sunboy even says at the beginning of the issue, Brainy, you have to explain to me again why we're here. And then Brainiac is cut off because that's when Superman's power goes haywire and they think that he's attacking them.
Mm-hmm. But they can only go to Superboy's past, or their past, Superboy's present, because the Time Trapper allows them to go from quote unquote real universe to Superboy's place.
Right.
Because I don't want to use the phrase that we learn later.
Yeah.
Uh, so why wouldn't the reverse be true?
Well, and I think in the Cosmic Boy I really should have read the Cosmic Boy
I
miniseries again.
I thought the same thing.
I don't remember if Time Trapper says that he allowed Cosmic Boy to go back to the proper 1986 at the time.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but that's the impression I have, and
Yeah.
I don't know why, other than assuming that's what was in there. So yeah, I think between this episode and the next one, we're gonna have to go back and look at that specifically. But
I don't know if I can even answer it from what I've read in the third chapter. I'm like,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
there's something in the fourth chapter I don't remember. So that little bit of dialogue could be moot. It could just be, maybe he did. Maybe he is manipulating events.
Well,
I just don't feel that it is, because it's not like he knew, well, he is the time trapper, that Pete was going to warn them and that they were going to run away.
mm-hmm.
The assumption was he was going to catch up and just do the same thing, right? Like, it wasn't like Time Trapper. That's the I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. In my mind, I'm hoping, I would rather it be that that's why Byrne Superman gets roped in, because it's completely by accident.
Well, and that's why that was my question. Really, going to be my question for you, because you had said that Time Trapper did not foresee Superman's involvement, but this is where I'm bumping up against what Time Trapper says about bringing all the players together. And that could mean simply that he's talking eventually about the rest of the Legion,
Yeah.
And Superboy specifically, right?
Crypto.
But it, right? But it made me think he means Superman too. But then if you extrapolate that out, what does Superman actually provide
Confusion.
to the overall story besides being a place, the reader's point of view,
Yeah,
right? Or whether you know about the Legion history or not, right? So this is, he just comes in and kind of mucks things around and tries to figure things out, and ultimately, he doesn't by the end of this issue. He's just more confused.
and maybe Superboy's explanation at the end of the third chapter, maybe I'll think differently about Time Trapper's involvement with Byrne Superman. I don't remember it now, and it's not part of this conversation technically. So we might have to put a pin in that.
Yeah. So speaking of Superboy, this is where you had mentioned this earlier too. He explicitly states, "You must die, Legionnaires." Whereas before, he said in issue 37, "I have to track the Legionnaires through time until I've trapped each and every one of them." What the hell happened between then and now that he's declaring that the Legionnaires must die?
Cliffhanger.
But at least what's consistent is that he's there to save the universe,
and maybe it has to do with what happens in the third chapter, and the outcome, and what really is going on with Superboy. We could sort of say,
yeah.
Oh,
wait a minute. Okay, so wait. It just occurred to me. Superboy's here. He's in Superman's area, right? He could only do that based on what we know about this whole situation. He could only do that if Time Trapper allowed it.
No, not Superboy. Superboy can go anywhere.
Any time.
Well, he was following the bubble.
Oh, well, okay, but that to me that gives credence to my theory that the Time Trapper is allowing anybody to go to where Superman is.
Well, because that's the main universe, though. Because there is only you can only go without. I don't want to say the.
You're right. I'm sorry. You're right.
Right. You can only go to the future or the past, or
yes. Okay.
Right.
Yep. You're right.
Yeah. And this is explained next issue. Yeah.
All right.
It's not perfect. I'm
It's
going to say
not.
it right.
No.
It's not perfect. And there are things in chapter 3 that I found mistakes with, and I'm going to argue about it. And I'm going to go against decades of what people think about, this whole
Ooh.
thing. Yeah, like it's not perfect. It's not perfect. My theory, I'll get this out right away. Because when on page 20, where they're recounting all this stuff about, we barely alluded it, the stasis field, the time bubble faded into non-space. It's not over yet, Superman. Superboy may have decided to follow us. Superman says, "You mean he can travel through time under his own power? I've never even tried such a thing. This Superboy of yours sounds like he may actually be more powerful than me. Count on it, Superman." And that's when they get attacked. And this shows up a lot. It shows up with Superboy Prime. It shows up with when they brought back Supergirl during the Jeff Loeb World's Finest Superman Batman thing comic, with Mark Silvestri, who was Michael Turner. That's who it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That Supergirl was more powerful than Superman. So Byrne Superman getting the beatdown from the Legion, this whole time thing, next chapter, which we're not going to talk about, and his powers going wonky. Part of me was like, did Byrne purposely depower Superman even a little bit more so that in his mind, I'm totally being a troll right now? Byrne could say, okay, I know in the story, everybody and Levitz and the editors want Superboy to be more powerful than Superman, but I know in my head canon, he's not, because I depowered him last issue. Ha ha. He's actually not at full strength. That's why Superboy. I could totally see Byrne doing that. Because why else why would he keep bringing up that his powers are wonky and he's feeling a little dizzy, I'm like, that could just be Byrne going, all right, fine. You want okay, but secretly he's not. I wrote a story that he's weaker. If I didn't write that story, he would have wiped Superboy's butt, which I don't believe, So
I've always liked that. I've always liked that idea that the Silver Age Superboy is more powerful than the modern at that time Superman.
Right. Well, they depowered him.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't go through time, and there was a lot of things, like he can't exist out in space for
without
years.
something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when Byrne humanized him, which is one of the qualities of that run that I actually really like. Yeah, that altered what Superman was.
Sure.
Fundamentally. So, but yeah, I just the idea that a Superboy could be so powerful, and yet tying it back to the story, and yet are having to deal with this situation and the time trapper trying to save the universe. Again, it comes back to me. It just keeps coming back to, this is a character who deserves some respect, even though he appears to be being shown the door at this time. He deserves some respect, and he is the greatest hero of them all.
It makes sense. Totally makes sense.
I mean, when we talked in that Tales episode, our first issues, I think I mentioned something about the reason one of the reasons why I grabbed that issue 254 was that I saw Superboy in the cover. And to me, anything Superboy at that time, I was gobbling it up. I mentioned earlier the Superboy DC Digest. There was one of those, and I read the crap out of that because I love those old Superboy stories. And I'm not necessarily talking about all of the Silver Age stuff, but as they even got closer, in the 70s, there were some pretty good Superboy stories. So I love the character Superboy.
Right.
So this is a nice send off, I guess. They're deliberately trying to prop him up and not be the prototype Superboy Prime.
And yet there are people who do not like it. They say that this is all Burns doing, that he hated the mythos, and that's why he got rid of, the Superman family at large. And it's like, no, he doesn't work in a vacuum. I
Right.
mean, that was DC's decision as well.
So I was going to ask you about that too, because I heard the same thing. Back then I was not reading like I don't even know what the magazine Amazing Heroes, was that the one that was out?
Yeah.
That was kind of the big deal. I wasn't reading any kind of trade information or interviews or anything like that, right?
CBG was around too.
Mm-hmm. But I even got the sense that Byrne engineered this situation with Superman and erasing all that Silver Age stuff. But then I'll say in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years, I swear I read an interview with John Byrne basically saying, well, I didn't want to get rid of all that stuff necessarily, not all of it. But DC said, no, we want to start fresh and blah, blah, blah. I could not find a corroborating interview for that. So I was hoping maybe you had some insight on that.
No, I mean, everything that I would say to that is faulty memory. Like maybe I read that, maybe I didn't.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling.
Did Byrne change his mind? Did some of it have to do? Everybody keeps saying it has to do with the movie. Supergirl tanked. That's why the movie tanked, so they killed her off. Like I don't know. Because what's strange about it is somewhere in the late 80s there was a Superboy TV series, or early 90s, right? Like, two or three seasons of Superboy. So it's like you got rid of Superboy, yet you're doing a Superboy TV series. Like, so no, I don't think it was only Byrne's decision. He has to work with an editor, and he has to work within the confines. But if they wanted to strip down and pare down their universe, that is the way to do it.
Sure.
If you're trying to make it, he even says it, right? He says it on page 1, it can be a pretty heady experience realizing no one else in the world can do all the things I can do. Now, he's discounting Martian Manhunter, but Martian Manhunter can shape change. Can Superman? No. But there's no Supergirl. There's no Phantom Zone villains yet, I don't think. So they wanted him to be the only super character. So makes sense. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. I still didn't like it, but it made sense.
I did. I really did enjoy this run.
No. I'm not saying I did enjoy the Burns Superman run. I'm just saying I did not like that they jettisoned Superboy.
Oh, right. Well, I've said it before. I wasn't so beholden to the DC universe before the Crisis. I was only reading like 3 years worth of it, so it didn't. When they wanted to change it, I was like, sure, go ahead. What do I care? Do you have any other larger points or other points? Otherwise, I can go through quickly what I have for this issue.
No, I don't have larger. I have a couple questions for you.
Okay, what do you have?
Well, I guess this might go towards a larger concern. On page 17 at the top, Brainiac 5 is doing his recap, and he says we had assumed that time and place to be denied to us, obliterated by the time trapper's machinations, meaning Superboy's time period. And I think that's the first time that's been explicitly stated. And does touch back on what Time Trapper, I think, implied at least, or alluded to, that I found confusing in issue 37. So I liked that we get that, but this still to me seems like an editorial or a writing edict, a storytelling edict. The Legionnaires must believe that Superboy's time is gone or inaccessible. but they never explicitly stated it in issue 37, as far as I recall.
Right.
So then they answer that here, but why do they believe that in the first place? So Time Trapper destroys the time beacon, but they rebuild it. So why? It just one of those
because they're going
details.
Yeah, they're going off of what Cosmic Boy has suggested. He has met a Superman that has no Superboy past.
Mm-hmm.
So they go and they say, remember, they were going to go to the end of time. They're going to Time Trapper, but they wind up in his past. So then they go, wait a minute. I thought there was no Superboy Smallville.
Okay. True.
That's why. Now, and I think the addition here is a clue to what we're going to learn next issue. It's that same thing with Superboy. Like, he has a mission. He wants to kill. Then we really learn in the next. I think this is the same progression.
Mm-hmm.
Something about the past. Now they're realizing, wait a minute. They found a Smallville exactly as we remembered it. Why? And that's what we're going to learn next issue. So I think they're moving that mystery one step closer to what we're going to get next issue, next chapter. So I think that's why they had to reiterate that.
That makes sense. The other thing that's kind of related to this, if you don't mind, and I was going to bring up earlier, but decided to wait until we discuss Superman number 8.
Mm-hmm.
So we've only seen Superboy a few times in this run of Legion of Superheroes. As far as I recall, issues 6, 11, 12, and 23. And then, of course, now. Number 16 is the Crisis crossover issue. So does that mean that his appearance in issue 12, he was not involved with Time Trapper?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
23 is the...
But in 23, yeah, that's the one where it's like, okay, wait a minute. And if you run with that assumption that he is compromised, then
I don't know if he's compromised. I think we remember, because we even said that when they traveled back in time, there was a weird blip in the
right.
So I think it's the first notion that the past, there's something about the past that's different from before. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Superboy's, I don't think he's there just yet.
I'm not suggesting that is, but if you entertain that thought,
sure,
and then reread that issue,
oh boy,
that maybe changes your perspective on what Superboy says and does.
Right.
So anyway, I thought that was an interesting thought.
That would be interesting, especially because he gave Mon-El his blood.
Exactly. Yeah. Is he trying to do certain things? I'm sorry, I really should have brought this up next episode when we get into Action Comics 591. So that really pertains to that more a little bit. So maybe we'll touch back on this later.
Okay.
All right. I think that's as far as like connection to the real storyline. That's I have, like I said, I have a couple of questions specific to the contents of this issue for you, but what else do you have?
I'm gonna rattle some quick things off, and if any of these touch to your questions, feel free to throw them in. They spell Edmund's name wrong. It's supposed to be Edmond, not Edmund.
Oh,
Hamilton.
I thought, yeah, I had a similar thought, but I did not double check it. So yeah. Interesting. And you bring that up because,
well, I mean, that's the creator of the Time Trapper.
Yeah.
And give the man his proper respect.
Right, because it's dedicated to the memory of Edmund Hamilton.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a different Edmund Hamilton out there? I was like, wait a minute, that don't make sense.
Okay, since you brought it up, I saw that dedication. I'm like, oh well, what is the real impact of this person, right? So I went and looked at him up. He wrote many Superman and several Legion stories, Adventure Comics 306 to 319, 321 to 322, 324, 325, 327, 332, on and up through various issues through 345. And so just to give some perspective, he wrote the issue 312, where Prody sacrifices itself to revive Lightning Lad. That's a pretty major story. 315, and I think we've talked about this before, in regards to Stone Boy, who wins the contest to join Legion, but he stays with the subs. 317, Dream Girl joins the Legion. 321, Time Trapper is the villain of that story. Is that, I forget, Peter, is that the first appearance of Time Trapper?
I don't remember. I don't have those numbers memorized.
324, we get the Heroes of Lalor. I think we've talked about that one. 327 is the introduction, I believe, of Lone Wolf, later to be known as Timberwolf. 335 and 336, Starfinger. We get that story. 342, Starboy kills that one. We talked about this in the Starboy spotlight. Kills that one person and is expelled. And then finally, 344, we've talked about this as well, the Super Stalag of Space story. So some major stories in Legion history done by Hamilton.
Yeah, we talked about in that Time Trapper episode for Legionnaires 3 just how important he is to the Legion mythos. Yeah. Page 6. So he says, Sunboy says, Pete Ross said Superboy attacked them. But that's not what Pete Ross said. So when I mentioned...
Right.
He said... Yeah, he said somebody must have attacked all of them. So this is a little bit... This is like a small mistake, but it was just enough because they keep bringing it up. And I'm like, no. That's not what Pete Ross said. You figured it out in that panel you were talking about them looking out and seeing Superboy, with the Brainy's face looking all mad. They figured out that it was Superboy. Pete Ross didn't. So it's one of those crossover mistakes, I guess.
Well, and it's funny because in the recreation on page 19, we have the same exact language or wording, yep. and that's not what he says. So, boy, somebody was not reading this very well.
Carlin and who was the other editor? Helfer. Shame. Page 10 is when Superman brings up the Crisis. It's odd that he never brings up Cosmic Boy, because Cosmic Boy says to him about something about the Legion. Now, I don't know if anybody has called themselves the Legion yet, but I just feel like would he notice the rings? Would he, he met Booster Gold, remember that weird limbo, whether it was really this burned Superman or not. So it's just, and he, unlike Cosmic Boy last chapter, Superman's like, I met a kid who called himself Superboy a few months ago, but he went off into limbo at the end of the Crisis. Like, he fully remembers the Crisis. So this is a character that does remember. Here's the thing I love about Brainiac 5 recounting the origin story of Venture Comics 247. Because Byrne recreates panels, he's also creating the narration. In the original story, it's just, the invisible narrator narrating the story. But when you put that same, because it is almost the same dialogue, but it's Brainy telling the story, to me, I was like, this means all those Silver Age stories are being told to someone. And I think it would be great, almost like a St. Elsewhere thing, where you get to the end of like this 4 issue and it's like someone reading the Superboy as an old man reading the stories to his young kids because he's still alive at the end of, you know what I mean? Like, it just,
yeah.
I completely loved, that was another reason why I really loved the edition of the origin story, because I was like, wow, that's really smart. It's Brainy telling the story. They're using the same dialogue, and it's such a Silver Age thing, and it felt personal. I loved it. And it gives what I said before. It makes me as a reader feel like, yes, those stories matter.
Yeah,
they still matter. Changing the headquarters to be in Metropolis and not Smallville means that could be the reason why if this version of Superboy did grow up to be Superman, why he decides to go base in Metropolis,
Mm-hmm.
possibly. Love the recreation of Greg LaRoque's Who's Who entry on page 15. So that shot of the Legion team.
Oh, okay. That was one of my questions for you because at the bottom it says John and Carl. I can't even read that. John and Carl after Greg and Larry. So
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't. I remember this. It looks familiar, but I couldn't place where it was from. So
Yeah, from the Who's Who entry. Some characters moved around a little bit, and there's one or two missing, but it's pretty much spot on, which is really great. Page 16 with the Legion of Supervillains. Terrace is drawn in blue coloring, not brown,
mm-hmm.
which we talked about somewhat before during the Eye for an Eye story. And the last thing I have is, yes, when he seeing Superboy on page 21, he is he feels like a teenager. He feels like a young Clark Kent. However, there was an interesting comment in a future letter column about this issue where somebody says Burns' young Clark Kent is much meatier, is thicker.
Mm.
He's brawnier than this version. So it is, and yet it is not Burns' younger self. Burns' younger self of Superman. Like it even though there's some dialogue in the next chapter too, where they're like, you look like my. It's not though.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to Man of Steel and compare
mm-hmm.
that Clark Kent to this Clark Kent, Byrne always drew him chunkier.
Yeah. Linebacker-esque as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
a more, well, really, if I'm thinking about the Silver Age Superboy appearances in the Legion and whatnot, he's pretty skinny. He's a skinny kid.
And we'll hit on that notion on chapter 3 as well. So maybe not a chapter that is answering a lot of questions, but it does serve a purpose. And it's one of those chapters that you read and then go, okay, it's not my favorite, but let's go on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Definitely worth talking about, though, for a number of things. And I think it's going to mean more when we get to next episode. I'm a lot of my notions about chapter 3 will connect back to this issue. So it almost gives it a little bit of a boost because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Long episode.
I was gonna say a meaty episode.
Yeah. This is and we're not done yet.
Oh boy.
My God. So much to talk about in chapter 3.
Well, it's episode 50, so we got to do something big.
It's going to be big, folks.
watch episode 50 will come in under the time for this.
Nope. I'm just looking at my notes now. No, I have so many things to rant about. And
all right.
As I was researching and, various DC wiki sites and websites, I was like, you're all wrong. You're all wrong. Some of them are so wrong. It's like, you got to change decades of thinking. So that issue is going to be real interesting.
I am very much looking forward to this.
Oh, I can't wait. Next episode, Legion of Superheroes. No, Action Comics 591, and then Legion of Superheroes 38.
Right.
Anything we find in Who's Who update number 2 from 1987. And our big episode 50. So, send us some love and send us some emails or voicemails and we'll play them,
Yeah. Or leave comments, replies at our Just Another Fanboy sub forum.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm. We want to make that a celebration. That's our big 50th as we celebrate 5 years. It's just, a lot of synergy going on. So give us a reason to continue on.
What? Just talking about the Legion of Superheroes is not enough?
Oh my God. It's very interesting. This feels bigger than the Universo project in many ways because there's just so much to talk about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
its place within it. It means so much more to just the Legion. It's got weight for like the entire DC universe.
Yeah, I feel the same way. While I enjoyed large aspects of, well, mostly just the characterizations of many of the players in the Universal Project, this has so much more meaning,
Yeah.
overall to the Legion, and also just my appreciation of the Legion.
And whether we're right, wrong, or whatever, we're having conversations because I know there's people out there who's like, you're wrong about that. You're wrong about that. No,
Tell us why we're wrong.
No, these are our reactions. This is how I feel now. Like you're not necessarily, you might introduce something that you found in an interview somewhere, but that doesn't matter to me because it's not on the page. When you take script analysis, you don't care about an interview the author did 10 years later. What is on the page? What are you getting on the page? And so far, what we're getting on the page is how we feel, our reactions, whether they're right, whether they're wrong. That's what I love about this, what I'm learning about this, reading it 35 years later.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, especially because I've read crisis stories and more crisis stories and heard people's suppositions about things. And then when you read it again, you're like, you're not right. I can't wait till we get to the next chapter.
All right.
So, send us email, peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
This was a good episode. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Peter.
And as always,
long live the Legion Project Podcast.
And Superboy.
And crypto for the next episode.
Oh, there you go. All right. See ya.
Bye, Peter.